Chapter 141. The whole villa kept shaking under the tremendous force. The ceiling had been completely cracked. Huge stones, dust, and heavy rain fell in the hall at the same time. A black figure fell along with the falling rocks. Sanluan Tingjing's pupils had contracted to the limit. In his sight, there was only a sharp silver light. The human emperor, which was more than 2 meters long, was fully extended. It cut through the air and stabbed directly at Sanluan Tingjing's head with a harsh whistling sound. It was raining heavily. A solo attack. The silver spear tip pointed straight down, and the curved spear blades on both sides of the spear tip had been completely opened. The whole spear body showed an indescribable coldness and elegance, dangerous and violent. The spear body stabbed straight down, and all the gravel turned into powder in an instant. The raindrops had condensed into icicles before they fell to the ground, surrounding Sanluan Tingjing's whole body. Fast. Everything happened in an instant. It was as fast as the wind and as powerful as the thunder. At the critical moment of life and death, Sanluan Tingjing was an expert at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. With a roar, he pulled out a sharp, soft sword from his waist in an instant. His arms swept across, and the fire scattered. The icicles that trapped him in place melted instantly, and the long spear above him arrived. Sanluan Tingjing slightly leaned sideways, and the silver spear almost stuck close to his body and stabbed straight down. The sharp spear light cut through his skin and instantly left a deep wound on his face. The long spear sank 1/2 meter into the ground. Before Li Tianlan's body landed on the ground, his hand holding the long spear suddenly lifted. In an instant, the silver light whistled up. Bang! On the ground, the floor with a radius of several meters was lifted up by Li Tianlan's spear. The wooden floor vibrated wildly, and countless pieces of wood and stones almost covered the sky and the earth and smashed towards Sanluan Tingjing. This coherent. From top to bottom, and then from bottom to top, there was no pause. Sanluan Tingjing didn't even have time to breathe. Before the momentum of the spear fell, the human emperor had drawn a cold arc like a full moon and smashed directly at his head. Damn it! Sanluan Tingjing roared angrily and quickly retreated. The long spear suddenly stopped, and the spear head lit up. Li Tianlan held the spear with one hand and strode forward. Straight stab. Church. Torrential rain fell from the broken ceiling into the hall. The rain on Li Tianlan's body had completely evaporated. The dazzling fire bloomed on the spear, surging with endless heat. Shadow formula. Switch positions. The 2-meter-long spear appeared in front of Sanluan Tingjing in an instant. Sanluan Tingjing's expression changed dramatically. In his sight, the comely and calm face was instantly drawn closer. Everything in front of him seemed to have disappeared, and all he could see was Li Tianlan's eyes. It was a pair of eyes that shone brightly, revealing its sharpness, but also burning with endless madness and determination. It was a killing intent that would not hesitate to sacrifice anything. It was an indomitable will, one that would not retreat even in the face of death. Invincible. An invincible person, an invincible spear, an invincible momentum, and an invincible killing intent. The ferocious spearhead was less than 30 centimeters away from Sanluan Tingjing's chest. Blazing sun. Sanluan Tingjing's eyes suddenly condensed like never before, and the surging flames burst out all over his body. His slightly short body suddenly made a strange turn to avoid the spear. The soft sword in his hand was straightened directly, and the flames soared. Spin! Sanluan Tingjing's body almost touched the silver spear. He took a step toward Li Tianlan and raised his arm. The long sword with surging flames swept toward Li Tianlan. A calm and indifferent voice suddenly sounded. There was only one syllable, which sounded like the Chinese of the Shina people he hated most. Stop! With the place where the two men fought as the center, the air in the hall suddenly twisted and stilled for a moment. The Buddhist incantation of 9 words, stop formula. The flames on the soft sword in Sanluan Tingjing's hand suddenly paused. The blue veins on Li Tianlan's arm bulged, and the hand holding the silver spear pressed down with all its strength. Crack! In the clear sound of bones cracking, the silver spear weighing more than 50 kilograms pressed hard on Sanluan Tingjing's shoulder, and the shoulder bone broke without any suspense. Under the severe pain, Sanluan Tingjing screamed and subconsciously knelt on the ground. Wait! Before he could say a word, Li Tianlan had kicked him directly in the chest. Bang! Sanluan Tingjing's body shook violently, and his short body suddenly rose into the air. Blood spurted from his mouth and fell on the wall. Li Tianlan, who had never talked nonsense from beginning to end, did not stop the momentum of his spear at all. He switched places with the shadow for the third time. The tip of the spear appeared in front of Sanluan Tingjing in the blink of an eye. At the moment when the high priest of Amaterasu's shrine opened his eyes subconsciously, the long spear rushed over. The silver tip of the spear pierced into his chest, and the blade of the spear went deep into his skin. It pierced through his chest and came out through his chest. The tip of the spear pierced into the wall through Sanluan Tingjing's body. The wall full of steel bars and concrete collapsed in an instant. All the steel bars bent like soft bread under the great force, and then broke completely. A big hole was broken in the whole wall. Bricks and stones flew. The dust fell in an instant. Sanluan Tingjing, who seemed to want to say something, was lying in the ruins with his mouth open, but his vitality had completely disappeared. The heavy rain once again soaked Li Tianlan from head to toe. Li Tianlan squinted at the body of Sanluan Tingjing in the ruins, narrowed his eyes and whispered, "Let's talk on the way." Sanluan Tingjing opened his mouth wide, and his eyes were filled with horror. From beginning to end, this core figure of the Shinto force of East Island didn't even know why he died. Second, from breaking the wall to the death of Sanluan Tingjing, the whole process took less than 5 seconds. The villa had become a dangerous house, and the owner of the villa had died. Li Tianlan had no time to waste. Every second he stayed here meant more danger for him, so he didn't bother to talk nonsense with Sanluan Tingjing. He went all out as soon as he made a move. The shadow formula switched positions, and the stop formula killed. In an instant, everything was done in one go. The whole assassination process was extremely violent and smooth, without any hindrance. It was hearty. This was a real one-hit kill. Behind Li Tianlan, the 2 men in suits who were responsible for kidnapping the 2 Zhongzhou girls and looking forward to staying and playing with them finally reacted. They screamed and fled from the main entrance. Li Tianlan didn't even bother to look at them. He carried the human emperor and left directly through the hole in the wall in front of him. "Wait a minute, please." Behind him, a soft voice filled with fear and sobbing sounded. It was not very standard Japanese. Li Tianlan kept moving forward with no expression on his face. "Wait a minute, please." The soft voice continued to ring, but this time it was in Chinese. Li Tianlan stopped but did not turn around. The girl who asked for help behind him was surprised. In a dangerous situation, she had the joy of meeting an old friend in a foreign land. She held another companion in the box who seemed to have been hit in the leg by a stone and begged, "Please, help us. We are also from Zhongzhou State." Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said calmly, "There is a car outside the main entrance. You can drive it and escape. The people here are probably looking for me now, so the defense is simple. Whether you can survive or not depends on your luck." He took a deep breath and said no more. He left the villa directly through the hole, never looking at the 2 Zhongzhou girls behind him, and didn't care about their life or death. A hero saving the damsel in distress? What a ridiculous idea. If Li Tianlan was just an ordinary Zhongzhou tourist, he might help them in this kind of situation. But what was his identity now? He was a special agent of Zhongzhou State who was on a top-secret mission in East Island. How could he save them? How dare he save them? Not only could he not save them, but what he should do now was to turn around and kill the 2 girls. He didn't mind saving them, but Zhongzhou State couldn't bear the consequences. The identities of these 2 girls were extremely transparent and clean, and such people were the easiest to investigate. Once Li Tianlan saved them, it would be a piece of cake for the East Island government to find out who Li Tianlan was. It wouldn't be so terrible if he was exposed. But if East Island operated secretly and got him together with Zhongzhou State, it would be a conspiracy and wrestling between countries. And such a fight had always been extremely bloody and tragic. In this plot of Zhongzhou State, the size of the Snowdance Corps had reached nearly 20,000 people. Once these people went out of the country, no matter whether they succeeded or failed, the high-level officials of Zhongzhou state would never admit that they had anything to do with Zhongzhou state. Naturally, no one would believe such a denial. But the important thing was that it was a reason. No matter how bullshit the reason was, it was a reason, and East Island couldn't produce any evidence. This was the fig leaf of the fight in the dark world. And once he saved the two girls, once East Island found out about them, they were very likely to take the initiative to tear down the fig leaf of Zhongzhou state and slap their faces. On the one hand, it was the young lives of the two girls. On the other hand, it was the position of Zhongzhou state in the dark world in the next few decades. What was national affairs? What was the overall situation? What was the choice? This kind of choice was cruel, but this was the general trend. He had to go with the flow and couldn't help it. Li Tianlan took a deep breath. He was not so cold-blooded as to kill people to keep their mouths shut for the time being. But he really couldn't save the two girls behind. They were on their own. Li Tianlan held the gun faster and faster, from walking to trotting, and then to striding. Every second counted. The night rain was like a curtain. The heavy rain was like a waterfall. The rain washed the silver body of the gun, and the blood gradually disappeared. In the messy footsteps, a patrol team of 5 people appeared directly in front of Li Tianlan. The human emperor closed in an instant. At the moment when no one raised the muzzle, Li Tianlan had already rushed through the formation of the 5 people. Under the heavy rain, the 5 elites stood quietly in the same place, holding their guns, motionless. Li Tianlan's figure had rushed into the woods, as fast as lightning. Spirit Moon Special Operations Group was a semi-official special warfare agency of East Island, and it was also a special warfare agency belonging to Night Spirit. Countless experts in East Island had changed their identities in special operations groups like Spirit Moon. They were transformed into the elites of the special warfare system of East Island, or the elites of Night Spirit, or the free men of the Dark World. This position, which was not a high-ranking but extremely sensitive one, was bound to change hands after tonight. As for what Zhongzhou state could get from this change of ownership, it was not Li Tianlan's concern at all. Spirit Moon Special Operations Group was very important. Sanluan Tingjing was also very important in his hunting target of this trip. But he was not the most important one. Even in Dongdu, in Shinjuku, Sanluan Tingjing was not the most important one. Li Tianlan shuttled quickly through the woods. The first hunting target had been completed. Chapter 142. The entire Takeshita Street took emergency actions in the heavy rain. In the villa of the headquarters at the end of the street, orders were issued one after another. Not only the patrol squads, but also some of the East Island special warfare elites, who had fallen asleep in the heavy rain, gathered for the first time and rushed to the location of the Spirit Moon Society. Encirclement, interception, inescapable net. Over Takeshita Street, a military low-altitude satellite with super high resolution had been fully turned on. In an instant, the picture of every corner of Takeshita Street appeared on the big screen of the headquarters at the same time. Orders were issued one after another, becoming more precise and effective. The footsteps were loud and messy. A large number of patrols rushed into the woods of the Spirit Moon Society without hesitation and directly killed the target according to the orders they received. Under the woods, the heavy rain fell down. Blood flew up. The heavy rain did not stop, and the blood did not stop. The silver human emperor had turned into 2 swords. The sharp silver-white sword light and sword momentum were like a tide. As the crowd surged, they constantly flew in all directions. Wherever the sword light passed, all the trees and grasses were burning fiercely. The fire burned more and more fiercely in the heavy rain within a range of tens of meters. Some people were buried in the sea of fire, but more people were smashed by the sword light. Move forward, keep moving forward. Li Tianlan's eyes were unprecedentedly focused and bright, and the fighting intent was burning in his pupils like a raging fire. Everything in front of him was directly torn apart in the raging sword light. He moved faster and faster, and his momentum and killing intent were getting more and more violent. This was a retreat. This was an escape. But on him, There was a kind of momentum as if thousands of troops and horses were charging forward. The killing intent was majestic and unstoppable. More and more squads gathered in the direction of Li Tianlan's breakout. In his sight, the woods were coming to an end. Rushing out of the woods, it was the outside world that was densely packed with twists and turns. Li Tianlan's eyes narrowed slightly, and he held his swords tightly. Tens of meters ahead, at least 7 or 8 patrol squads gathered together roared at the same time. The endless heavy rain stopped, and an ice wall more than 20 meters long and at least 10 meters thick instantly blocked in front of Li Tianlan. "Idiot! What are you doing? He is on your left." The moment the ice wall rose, the commanders in the command center who were watching the encirclement through the big screen were the first to jump up and curse. The moment the ice wall rose, everyone only saw Li Tianlan's body shake. His body seemed to be still in the same place, but the real him had appeared dozens of meters away. Only a shadow stood where he originally stood, and after a few seconds, it dissipated. "Shadow." In the command room, the oldest commander frowned. "Everyone, don't you think this scene is very familiar?" The other commanders were stunned. "Sai City, Zhongzhou State, Lord of Shadow, Tribulation." The old commander said coldly and narrowed his eyes. The moment he switched places with his shadow, a second shadow appeared in front of him. Li Tianlan's figure flickered again, and he had already rushed out of the woods and into an alley. Boundless sea and sky? Just as Li Tianlan relaxed, the next second, endless light suddenly lit up, turning from extreme darkness to extreme brightness. In an instant, Li Tianlan was in a trance. Countless rays of light flashed in front of him, but they were meaningless. In the second half of Takashita Street, every alley was lit up. This was not an ordinary light, but a bright and dazzling light like a searchlight. The dark alley suddenly turned into a dazzling whiteness. Standing in the alley, Li Tianlan was really like a firefly in the night, so conspicuous that he couldn't be more conspicuous. Bang! The sound of a large-caliber heavy sniper rifle sounded. At the same time as the gunshot sounded, Li Tianlan had quickly moved to the side. Bang! There was a big hole in the wall where he originally stood. Li Tianlan was surrounded by bright light and could not see anything. He could only hear the sound to identify the position of the sniper. But in this area of thousands of meters, there were nearly 400 snipers. In the case that he could not see, even if Li Tianlan could hear the sound to identify the position, he was in an extremely dangerous situation. Before the second gunshot sounded, Li Tianlan's figure moved slightly, and his whole body became chaotic in an instant. Small steps forward, big steps forward, small steps left, small steps back. In an instant, countless shadows flickered around Li Tianlan. His every movement was never repeated. In a trance, in the sniper's scope, the snipers could not tell whether Li Tianlan was moving forward or backward. Shoot! A gloomy order sounded in the ears of every sniper. How could they shoot without aiming? All the snipers tried to aim at Li Tianlan. Before the second order sounded, the sniper closest to Li Tianlan could not hold back and pulled the trigger. Bang! The long and narrow bullet shot at Li Tianlan, but it fell 3 meters away from him. Li Tianlan seemed to be motionless, but his body kept moving forward. Suddenly, his figure had entered another alley. Some snipers suddenly lost their target vision. The unique skill of Sai City, Desperate Chase. This unique skill, known as the first body movement in the Dark World in recent years, was impeccable in both dodging and attacking, especially when he had the advantage of realm. Facing a group of snipers who were at most in the ice-condensing realm or even the chi-controlling realm, as long as Li Tianlan was not courting death, the snipers could not aim at him at all. Fire at the same time. No need to aim. Shoot. The second irascible order echoed in every sniper's ears. Bang, bang, bang. Countless gunshots suddenly enveloped the alley where Li Tianlan was. Li Tianlan's figure paused. "I hit him." A surprised voice sounded, but before his voice died away, Li Tianlan, who was frozen in place, had disappeared. Damn, it's the shadow again. What the hell is this? Where is he now? Who has his vision? The sniper's complaints kept ringing out. The atmosphere in the headquarters became more and more oppressive. A young commander looked ferocious and said coldly, "Just mobilize heavy firepower and flatten this area. I don't believe he can come out alive." "Idiot! Don't you know how many civilians are nearby? With so many civilians dying, the Prime Minister is going to step down. Can you afford such consequences?" Another commander retorted with an irritated look. The Prime Minister of East Island this time was full of courage, and amazing means. It could be said that he was their overall backer. If the Prime Minister was implicated, none of them would be well off. Heavy weapons are not advisable. The oldest commander narrowed his eyes, kept silent for a while and said slowly, "I'll go." Several other commanders were shocked. "You'll go in person? The other party is not weak. You may not be his match." "I'll go, it's safer." The old commander took a deep breath and made up his mind. Without hesitation, he walked out of the headquarters and said loudly, "Prepare the car." "Tunun, what's the situation on your side?" Li Tianlan's figure had appeared in a yard next to the alley. He found a black plastic bag in the yard and covered his glasses, treating them as sunglasses. Just after he finished all this, Bai Yoming's voice sounded in his ears. "It's okay. They are breaking out of the encirclement. I can handle it." Li Tianlan said calmly, "There are just too many people. Don't worry." At the other end of the communication, Bai Yuming was silent for a moment and said softly, "Horsewoman and Flaming Fire are ready to pick you up. Do you want?" "No need." Li Tianlan directly interrupted Bai Yuming and said calmly, "I can break through here. Let's not talk about it now." Bai Yuming hesitated a little, and finally gritted her teeth and said, "In this case, you go left. We have hacked their satellite. Although we can't see the picture, we have already got the dynamics of their area. At present, the third alley on your left has the least guards. It's just the right place to break through." Li Tianlan said, switched places with the shadow again, and appeared in another yard. At this time, every alley was full of dazzling lights. Li Tianlan couldn't see anything, nor could those patrol squads. So they were smart enough to not come in at all. They just kept sending people to block the entrances of the alleys, waiting for them. Even if he didn't go out, as long as he was blocked inside, there would soon be a master coming in to catch him. Switching places with the shadow again, Li Tianlan's body appeared in the alley. The black plastic bag covered his eyes, and everything in front of him was vague. Li Tianlan didn't stop and sprinted in the alley. The snipers who had lost their vision fired again. A large number of bullets were shot from the front and back of Li Tianlan. His figure was sometimes fast and sometimes slow in the rain of bullets, but he never stopped. The bullets were getting denser and denser. In the heavy rain, several ice walls had appeared around Li Tianlan. Countless bullets hit the ice walls. The ice walls trembled and Li Tianlan's physical strength was constantly consumed. Bai Yuming, who couldn't see the picture at this time, said in a more urgent tone, "Tianlan, hurry up, we just got the information that Miyamoto Xianxia has left the headquarters and intends to kill you personally. Your direction of breaking through is exactly the same as his direction of advance." Miyamoto Xianxia. This was also a character on Li Tianlan's hunting list. In terms of strength and importance, Miyamoto Xianxia could be said to be in the top 3 on his hunting list. He was a master at the stabilization phase of the Thundershocking Realm, the left priest of Amaterasu Shrine, and now the person in charge of the Night Spirit Mansion. The Night Spirit Mansion could be said to be the most important institution of Night Spirit in Dongdu. It was responsible for contacting and leading everything in Dongdu. All the forces of Night Spirit in Dongdu, whether it was the underworld, consortium, special warfare agencies, or political forces, were all based on the Night Spirit Mansion. After the destruction of Night Spirit, Miyamoto Xianxia controlled the Night Spirit Mansion. For Zhongzhou State, this was a person who must be killed even at any cost. In Li Tianlan's current state, he didn't need to be afraid of a master at the stabilization phase of the Thundershocking Realm. But a Miyamoto Xianxia plus thousands of special warfare elites on Takashita Street, Li Tianlan had no chance of winning. He must break through and he must be fast. Li Tianlan took a deep breath, and around him, the broken ice walls instantly condensed together. Li Tianlan didn't hide his figure. He took countless bullets from the sniper rifle, let his physical strength be consumed quickly, and rushed straight to the alley that Bai Yuming said. At the entrance of the alley, at least dozens of special warfare elites of East Island were gathered there, ready to fight. Li Tianlan's figure rose into the air. In his sight, a thick ice wall suddenly condensed and became thicker and thicker. Li Tianlan was in the air, holding two swords tightly. The fire all over the sky spread wildly with him as the core, and the whole alley became a blazing orange. The sword edge spun wildly with the diffusing fire, tearing the rain curtain and the sky. The eighth blade, burning heaven. Boom! At the entrance of the alley, the ice wall, which was at least more than 5 meters thick, collapsed instantly in the blazing fire. Countless huge ice cubes flew in all directions, and a large amount of blood flew high into the sky with the broken ice cubes. Li Tianlan rushed over with two swords in his hands. "Come on, hurry up." Bai Yuming took a deep breath and said in a hurry. "No hurry." Li Tianlan's figure rushed quickly, but he didn't leave Takeshita Street, but rushed directly to the depths of Takeshita Street. This time, it was a bold and unexpected move. Extreme and crazy. "What do you want to do?" Bai Yuming's sharp voice seemed to be screaming. "I don't want to do anything." Li Tianlan said calmly, "I just want to kill back." "You little madman. Little bastard. Who do you want to kill?" Chapter 143. Going against the wall. It was an unimaginable and crazy decision. It could be said to be soul-stirring. Although East Island was a small country, their special warfare system had always been one of the most elite forces in the Dark World. Although Li Tianlan didn't kill Sanluan Tingjing for a long time, thousands of elites had been fully mobilized. The first half of the street was filled with countless special warfare elites, and the second half was filled with masters of dozens of special warfare systems. There was a real iron wall in front and behind. Everyone was waiting for Li Tianlan to hit it himself. At least in the hearts of every East Island elite, the assassin who killed Priest Sanluan Tingjing could not leave tonight. But who could have thought that Li Tianlan had no intention of leaving at all? He rushed out of the alley and out of the encirclement. Li Tianlan didn't hesitate and went back directly. The two swords of the human emperor were put together and stretched out in a flash. A silver spear more than 2 meters long appeared in Li Tianlan's hand again. The heavy rain kept pouring on Takeshita Street. Thunder and lightning cut through the sky at the same time. In the dark environment of the second half of the street, Li Tianlan held the spear in one hand and sprinted at full speed. How important was Miyamoto Xianxia, who controlled the Night Spirit Mansion? It was no exaggeration to say that the Night Spirit Mansion was the hub of all the forces of the Night Spirit Organization in Dongdu. Everything of the Night Spirit in Dongdu was mediated by the Night Spirit Mansion. Controlling the members of the Night Spirit Mansion was equivalent to controlling the forces of the Night Spirit in Dongdu. The East Island government was very likely to push out the Shinto forces of East Island and build a second Night Spirit with the foundation left by the Night Spirit. Whether this plan succeeded or not, Miyamoto Xianxia would be an important figure in it. On Li Tianlan's hunting list, under the name Miyamoto Xianxia, there were many red dots. The hunting list in his hand was top secret. How many people had seen it? How many people were qualified to put red dots on this list? Such a thundershocking realm master with a special identity was worth 600 credits in this task of the Sky Academy, almost 4 times that of Sanluan Tingjing, which showed his importance. In the communication device in his ear, Bai Yuming's sharp voice was still ringing, but Li Tianlan turned a deaf ear. All the sounds disappeared in his ears, and the scenery on both sides of the street was constantly retreating. Li Tianlan's eyes gradually became dead, deep and quiet. A bright headlight cut through the night and rain in an instant. Hundreds of meters away, several cars with headlights on were rushing in Li Tianlan's direction at full speed. The two sides were 300 meters apart. The traffic did not stop. Li Tianlan kept going. The distance between them shortened rapidly. At this time, in this place where special warfare agencies gathered, even if it was not Miyamoto Xianxia who rushed out in a car, it was definitely a master who came to kill him. There was no need to stand on ceremony. Li Tianlan carried the sky attack on his back, held the long spear in his hand tightly, and rushed directly toward the vehicle hundreds of meters away. His speed was getting faster and faster. The fierce wind was whistling around him, and the falling rain was blown away by the strong wind. Li Tianlan's eyes were getting quieter and quieter. Essence, qi, and spirit had completely merged into one. 200 meters. 150 meters. 120 meters. 3 cars driving side by side finally found Li Tianlan with a silver spear in his hand. Priest Miyamoto, we found an assassin. He's rushing towards us. Ha, what a joke. Does he want to use his body to compete with our vehicle? Maybe the stupid Chinese people think that the quality of the cars we use is the same as those inferior vehicles exported to Zhongzhou state. In a black Toyota in the middle, Miyamoto's shiny eye was expressionless. In his sight, the figure with endless fierceness and killing intent crashed straight over, moving forward with a momentum that was enough to tear everything. Change the formation of the vehicle and hit him directly. Miyamoto's shiny eye said coldly, and his tone was cold and vicious. Kill him. With his voice, the position of the 3 cars that were originally arranged horizontally and side by side suddenly changed. The off-road vehicle on the left of the Toyota directly overtook Miyamoto's shiny eye's car, and the vehicle on the right was slightly behind. The 3 cars changed from horizontal to vertical and suddenly accelerated. Miyamoto's shiny eye quietly straightened his body, and his eyes were cold. This priest of the left, whose position was second only to the high priest in the Amaterasu shrine, was nearly 60 years old. His strength in the stabilization phase of the thundershocking realm was hopeless to continue to improve, but in recent years, his state had always been at the peak. The old man's hair had become sparse, and there were some wrinkles on his face. But his momentum did not show the slightest sign of aging. It was a kind of fierce and cold momentum, overflowing with sharpness, which could be called extraordinary. The off-road vehicle in the front row had blocked his sight, but in his mind, the figure holding a silver spear fearlessly charging became clearer and clearer. Idiot courting death. He gently raised the corner of his mouth and said indifferently. The distance between the 2 sides was getting closer and closer. 90 meters. 80 meters. Li Tianlan strode wildly and suddenly lifted the long spear in one hand. His body was completely stretched in an instant, and a dense sound like firecrackers suddenly sounded from him. In an instant, every joint of Li Tianlan's body was shaking wildly, and the sound was like thunder. The terrible power instantly condensed on his right hand holding the long spear. Li Tianlan rushed forward with the spear. Vibration. Countless joints were still shaking violently, densely packed together. 60 meters. A dazzling fire like the sun lit up from the body of the silver spear, and the surrounding rainstorm instantly evaporated into nothingness. Li Tianlan raised the spear over his head. The fire rushed into the sky. 50 meters. Li Tianlan's joints suddenly shook, and a sound like a dragon's roar spread in his body. Li Tianlan raised the long spear high, made a standard throwing gesture, and threw it hard. The spear with all his strength was thrown out directly. The fire all over the sky broke out in an instant. It was raining heavily in Dongdu. But there was only fire on the battlefield. With the human emperor as the core, endless fire was released almost unreservedly. The fire was raging and violent, and the sky within a radius of tens of meters turned into a fiery red in an instant. The silver spear burst forward. It crossed a distance of 50 meters. With an almost eternal violence and majesty. It was like the power of heaven and earth. Boom! The tip of the spear was inserted into the intake grill of the off-road vehicle in front with a large fire. The off-road vehicle, which had a speed of more than 120 kilometers per hour, suddenly stopped. The next second, the whole car was lifted by the huge force. The car flew into the air, the top of the car was down, and it smashed into the Toyota behind. The fire was raging all over the sky. The 2 cars kept retreating under the almost exaggerated power of the long spear, and finally collided with the 3rd car behind. The engine kept roaring. The 3 cars crowded together and retreated for 7 or 8 meters. In the raging fire, the off-road vehicle, whose front had been completely deformed, swelled slightly and exploded directly with a loud bang. Thick black smoke rose amidst the flames. The 3 cars exploded one by one, like 3 groups of fireworks, which was indescribably spectacular in the heavy rain. Miyamoto Shiny-Eye jumped out of the car with his assistant at the first time, but the other elites in the 3 cars were obviously not so lucky. They were all buried in the fire in the explosions one after another. Li Tianlan's figure had disappeared. Miyamoto Shiny-Eye's face was gloomy and indifferent. The assistant who mocked Li Tianlan the most in the car just now looked around nervously. The power of this spear seemed to be in the fire-flaming realm, but in terms of power, it had surpassed countless thundershocking realm experts. How could he be a master of the fire-flaming realm? He was simply a monster. Priest Miyamoto, could he have such strength? The assistant suddenly trembled, and his face was more pale and desperate. Miyamoto Shiny-Eye stood quietly in place. His eyes were dignified and serious. He did not look around, but stared at the fire caused by the car explosion in front of him. The heavy rain fell. The fire was gradually suppressed. The billowing smoke rose. A figure with a silver spear walked out of the rolling smoke and fire, not fast or slow, but the killing intent was soaring. The smoke and fire rose behind him. Li Tianlan's eyes were cold and deep, and the extremely condensed killing intent was slowly released from him. Under the smoke and heavy rain, he stood with a spear, like a god of war. "Who are you, Your Excellency?" Miyamoto Shiny-Eye was instantly covered with lightning. Countless electric arcs crackled and flowed on him. His body stopped more and more, and his momentum soared. "Miyamoto Shiny-Eye?" Li Tianlan lifted the spear and asked softly. His tone was soft and calm, even with a hint of unreal smile, cold and illusory. Miyamoto Shiny-Eye felt more and more dangerous. The huge sense of oppression was like a wildfire occupying all his senses. The lightning on his body became more and more dazzling, but he did not dare to move. In the headquarters, he was right. Other commanders were no match for Li Tianlan. But what he did not expect was that even he seemed to be no match for Li Tianlan. He took a deep breath and said reluctantly, "Your Excellency." Before he finished his words, the old priest's eyes had contracted instantly. Li Tianlan's long spear had been raised. The flames raged in the heavy rain, and the human emperor weighing hundreds of kilograms slammed down with the dull sound of wind and thunder. After a full spear, Li Tianlan's will and fighting intent had been at the real peak state. In this situation, there were pursuers in front and behind, and Li Tianlan was too lazy to talk nonsense. "Finish it quickly." Li Tianlan stepped forward with the spear and attacked wildly. Holy thunder! Miyamoto Shiny-Eye, who had already been fully prepared, did not hesitate and directly used the unique skill of Amaterasu Shrine. His hands shook, and a giant sword made of ice appeared in his hands. Inside the ice sword, there was lightning. Miyamoto Shiny-Eye held the sword above his head with one hand, facing Li Tianlan's long spear, and did not retreat half a step. Bang! The spear collided with the sword, and countless ice chips flew. The ice sword was smashed by the spear without any suspense. Fire and lightning flew out at the same time. Li Tianlan's figure had strode into the messy light and shadow, and a spear swept. The silver spear danced like a dragon. The horrible killing intent broke out under the rain. Li Tianlan's eyes were shining, and his every move showed a kind of determination and madness to tear everything. Wherever the silver spear went, there was nothing that could not be destroyed. Miyamoto Shiny-Eye's hands condensed into a shield. The light shield was broken under the spear. The electric knife had not yet been raised, and wherever the silver spear passed, the blade had dissipated. Countless long swords made of lightning condensed into a formation behind Miyamoto Shiny-Eye and rushed straight to Li Tianlan. Under the heavy rain, the silver light whistled, and the spear body opened and closed. One after another, the long swords burst under the silver spear. Countless lightning rushed to Li Tianlan, but they were swallowed by the fire. In the fire, the silver spear kept moving forward. It kept moving forward. Fire flaming suppressed thunder-shocking realm. And it was an absolute suppression. Domineering spear, domineering person. Li Tianlan seemed to have completely gone mad. His offensive was getting faster and faster, with a kind of almost invincible madness and domineering, destroying everything and suppressing everything. Miyamoto Xianxia's counterattack was getting weaker and weaker. One after another, the lightning passed through the flame, and a small amount of lightning hit Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan looked cold and hard, and he did not retreat. Miyamoto Xianxia, who was getting more and more embarrassed, looked desperate and ruthless, and his body, which had no way to retreat, suddenly stopped. Gotcha! The silver spear fell without any pause, ruthless and ruthless. The extremely heavy spear body fell on Miyamoto Xianxia's shoulder with the fire. Miyamoto Xianxia screamed fiercely, and one of his arms was smashed down by the spear and fell to the ground, dripping with blood. At the same time, Miyamoto Xianxia endured the severe pain and roared with resentment, Amaterasu! Amaterasu! The strongest unique skill of Amaterasu Shrine. There was thunder rolling down in the sky. Blood sprayed from Miyamoto Xianxia's shoulder. Before one of his arms fell to the ground, his body had suddenly swelled up. The unprecedented bright lightning condensed in front of him, and finally turned into a dazzling ball of light like a star. Miyamoto Xianxia's face was ferocious. The unique skill Amaterasu. The strongest unique skill was also the unique skill with the greatest cost. This move was equivalent to self-destruction. Once this move was used, even if he could survive this battle, there was no hope for Thundershocking Realm. It was already a great luck to be able to maintain in the fire-flaming realm. But it was better than death. Go to hell, bastard! Miyamoto Xianxia sneered. The arm that left his body finally fell to the ground. The light ball surrounded by infinite lightning was pushed out by Miyamoto Xianxia with one hand. The light ball instantly expanded, burst, and formed a large light curtain, covering Li Tianlan's whole body. Li Tianlan stood with the spear. He took a step forward. Starting from his feet, the fire on his body disappeared instantly in the lightning. Countless lightning fell on him, and in the blink of an eye, his body was torn into pieces. Miyamoto Xianxia did not look at the result and turned to escape. A figure with a silver spear appeared directly behind him. At the moment when he turned around, the two looked at each other. You. Miyamoto Xianxia instantly felt cold. The power is good, but can't you find where I am? Li Tianlan, who changed positions with the shadow at the critical moment, smiled and raised the long spear. There were two shadows exactly like Li Tianlan appeared in front of Miyamoto Xianxia, and at the same time, they raised the long spear. Li Tianlan looked indifferent and said softly, "Crack." Buddhist incantation of 9 words, crack formula, the first in single lethality and outbreak. 3 long spears pierced into Miyamoto Xianxia's chest at the same time. Li Tianlan's body disappeared. 2 shadows rushed through Miyamoto Xianxia's body. Bang! In the dull sound, Miyamoto Xianxia, who was covered with blood, shook slightly, and his body suddenly burst into countless flesh and blood. Chapter 144. As a country with a large population but severely limited military power, the existence of the Dark World could be said to be in line with the interests of East Island. In this paranoid and serious country, the people here might be crazy, perverted, or disgusting, but the almost rigid paranoia made many people in this country have a kind of toughness that ordinary people didn't have. So East Island never lacked superiors. Grandmaster of Kendo, Grandmaster of Saber, Supreme Ninja God. In every generation of East Island, these 3 titles had never been vacant. That was to say, in hundreds of years, even when East Island was at its lowest, there were at least 3 superiors of the invincible realm in the country. But East Island's martial arts were too extreme, close to the devil's path. When people were young, they excessively squeezed people's potential, but they couldn't get an effective supplement. So although East Island never lacked superiors of the invincible realm, few of them could be in the top of the divine list. Even the number 1 superior of East Island today, Tianhai Wuji, the Grandmaster of Kendo who used Saber, was only in the top 10 of the divine list, and there was still a long way to go to the top 5. But East Island didn't care about this at all. In the world, It could be said that it was the country that paid the least attention to individual heroism. What they needed were superiors of the invincible realm, but not absolute superiors who were invincible in the world. In this country's idea, only teamwork was invincible, just like a pack of wolves. Superiors of the invincible realm were like the Wolf King. With the ferocious and cunning wolves, such a team could play a much more important role than a single person on any occasion. This was the idea of East Island. The whole special warfare system of East Island was like a complete machine, and the superiors of the invincible realm were the most critical engine. But even if the superiors of the invincible realm weren't there, the machine could still operate at the fastest speed. In the heavy rain in Dongdu, with the chaos on Takeshita Street in Shinjuku, the whole Dongdu took action at the same time. A large number of elites and superiors began to gather on Takeshita Street. High-performance vehicles rushed out of the rain one after another, faster and faster. The headquarters villa on Takeshita Street was already a pool of blood. 5 commanders of the fire-flaming realm all fell in the command room, and everyone died with their eyes wide open. And Li Tianlan, who rushed into the headquarters villa, had disappeared. But orders were still passed down through the headquarters one after another, precise and clear, but in fact, they were meaningless. Time difference. After a perfect counterclockwise murder, Li Tianlan also created a time difference without any loopholes. After rushing out of those alleys that seemed to be hidden but were actually traps, no one would have thought that Li Tianlan would be so crazy that he not only didn't break out of the encirclement, but still went to the depths of Takeshita Street to kill. His going against the flow was equivalent to leaving countless East Island elites who blocked him in front of him behind. And with the speed of his charge, it was enough to make most of the East Island elites burst into tears. For Miyamoto Shinyai, Li Tianlan attacked with all his strength without reservation. After a moment of confrontation between the two sides, when the elites of East Island arrived at the scene, Li Tianlan had already rushed to the headquarters. The back of the street was the place where the masters gathered. Although there were ordinary elites, the number was too small. Such a small number caused some trouble for Li Tianlan, but it could not stop him from breaking out of the encirclement at all. The entire line of defense behind the street was scattered and almost collapsed by him. In the heavy rain, Li Tianlan broke out of the encirclement calmly and disappeared. Until it was confirmed that Li Tianlan had left Takeshita Street, by Yuming, who had been paying close attention to all this, was still beating violently. Li Tianlan's action was completely beyond her expectation. But all this seemed crazy in the eyes of others, but in his heart, it was his absolute confidence in his own strength. Fire-flaming realm. This kind of abnormal fire-flaming realm made by Yuming, a real genius of the thunder-shocking realm, a little numb. According to the information she got, Li Tianlan was still in the chi-controlling realm, not even the peak. Could it be that a month of special training could really make him break through 2 realms? How was this possible? But it was obviously not the time to investigate Li Tianlan's realm. Li Tianlan got away safely. Bai Yuming didn't even scold him, but calmly asked, "Tianlan, what's your next plan?" "Go to Ninghu." Li Tianlan calmly said, "Kill Dubian Xiangyu." Dubian Xiangyuan. Bai Yuming was silent for a while. If she remembered correctly, Dubian Xiangyuan was also a very important figure on the hunting list in Li Tianlan's hand. His importance was even no less than that of Miyamoto Shinyai. Li Tianlan now obviously picked the most difficult bones to bite. This person is not easy to kill. Bai Yuming thought for a while and said slowly, "It will be more difficult to kill him in the future." Li Tianlan's tone was calm. Everything on Takeshita Street tonight indicated that the special warfare system of East Island had been invaded by hostile forces. The lists in the hands of the 3 young heavenly sons of Zhongzhou State were extremely targeted. As long as the East Island government was not stupid, it could know their purpose with a little speculation, and then it could also have an idea of who they might want to kill. Before the East Island government intended to protect those important figures, Li Tianlan had to get rid of the most difficult bones. Otherwise, with their status in East Island would send heavy troops to protect them, and the possibility of him succeeding would be much lower than now. Bai Yuming said no more, but calmly said, You now have about half an hour to evacuate Shinjuku. We have just successfully invaded the headquarters of Takeshita Street and are issuing false orders, but East Island will soon find something wrong. Leave quickly before they surround Shinjuku. Li Tianlan said yes, walked to a black car on the roadside, and reached out to pull the door. Crack! The locked door was suddenly pulled open by him with one hand. The alarm sounded. Li Tianlan carried the sky attack behind him, got into the car, and left quickly. In short, be careful. You can give up the task when you can't do it. Your life is more important than the hunting task in many people's hearts. Bai Yuming chuckled, and her tone gradually became cold. Rushi participated in the second batch of hunting with other members of your East Emperor Palace, and she paused and said with a smile, it's time for us to act. We can't let you young people risk your lives outside. Li Tianlan was silent. Obviously, the thunder-shocking realm experts of Zhongzhou State, who were still in Azure Pool Hot Spring, gave the hunting task to the young people, not because they wanted to watch the show, but because they also had their own tasks. The black car moved forward in the heavy rain. Li Tianlan held the steering wheel and kept accelerating. The heavy rain and strong wind. The waves in Dongdu were monstrous, and they were about to spread to the whole East Island. At the same time, in the central area of Dongdu under the heavy rain, in a seemingly ordinary clubhouse, the raging fire burned everything fanatically. An ordinary-looking young figure was now emitting sword light all over his body. He held a sword in one hand, and the sword light kept splashing in the twisting fire. The blood all over the sky drifted from the enclosed area of the clubhouse to the quaint courtyard, and there were corpses all the way. The young man with an ordinary face looked calm. More and more people besieged him. The young man swept all the way and was about to approach the door. The young man, who had been killing silently all the time, suddenly roared, and his voice shook the sky. His body instantly soared into the sky in the heavy rain. The fire in the air surged wildly, and a large number of lights and shadows rose to the sky. The young man let go. He abandoned the sword. The long sword didn't fall, but strangely hung in the air and kept spinning. In an instant, all the long swords beside the countless corpses on the ground floated up with the young man. Dozens of swords. Hundreds of long swords rose at the same time and danced violently with the young man's body as the core. The sharp killing intent tore the rain curtain, and the dense sword formation fell like raindrops. The unique technique of Kunlun City. The 8th style of 10 skills of true martial arts. The 8th supreme sword move. Infinite sword light shuttled around the young man's body, and countless drops of blood floated in the crowd. His figure had rushed out of the door and quickly disappeared in the rain. The sword intent surged in the air. A dangerous and sharp sword intent whistled up and down in the garden full of blood, and it didn't disperse for a long time. The sword formation that was still suspended in the air fell down neatly after a full 2 minutes. The bright sword edge sank into the blood and rain, and there was no longer any elegance. Chio District, Dongdu. In a secret base less than 5 kilometers away from the East Island Imperial Palace. The sword light soared to the sky. A white-clothed figure had already practically vanished amidst the boundless sword lights, and only sword insight that grew stronger and stronger ceaselessly shot out from the numerous fountains of blood that shot into the sky, and it carried a sort of unparalleled fierceness and arrogance. Groups after groups of East Island elites rushed up fearlessly, but they were beheaded in a large area of sword light. The sword light flew out unscrupulously, with a kind of invincible and peerless sharpness, getting faster and faster. A clear and warm Japanese voice rang in the night rain and the sound of fighting, soft and playful. Miyazawa, how long are you going to hide? The elites of your East Island nation are almost all dead. Behind the crowd, a short, long-faced middle-aged man clenched his fists tightly. Between his fingers, the bright lightning kept flashing and gradually condensed into a gloomy and horrible spear. But he never made a move. On the battlefield, his men were getting fewer and fewer, but he never got the chance to make a move. The East Island nation is invincible. Miyazawa roared and raised his hand instantly. The spear in his hand was getting brighter and brighter, and it was about to leave his hand. Infinite power kept condensing on the spear in his hand, and the lightning was dazzling. He was still waiting for a chance to kill with one blow. The enemy who suddenly appeared tonight was too terrible. It seemed that he didn't care to sneak in at all. He ignored thousands of elites of their base and directly killed his way in from the gate. The large area of sword light poured down with thunder, and the violent and cold killing intent even made him, a thunder-shocking realm expert, tremble. He had to wait for the best opportunity. Miyazawa took a deep breath, suppressed his inner impulse, and watched silently. Invincible? In the crowd, a faint smile rang out. Well, let me see how you cannot be defeated. In the constantly flowing blood, the bright and unparalleled sword light suddenly condensed. In the next second, the young man, who had been killing the enemy with his strength since the beginning of the war, finally showed his realm. A shocking thunderbolt seemed to pierce the ground directly from the sky. On the giant sword that was waving a large area of sword light, the dazzling thunderbolt suddenly bloomed with countless electric lights. At that moment, Miyazawa saw the giant sword in the young man's hand. It was a giant sword with a broad blade of nearly 2 meters. It looked heavy and steady, with a kind of almost violent dominance and power. The moment the giant sword appeared in Miyazawa's pupils, the electric lights rushed up to the sky. Miyazawa suddenly screamed, turned around, and ran. He didn't even have the courage to make a move, and ran away directly. He knew that sword. He also knew this unique skill. The famous sword of the Wang family of Beihai, Firmament. The unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, sword listens to thunder. Behind him, countless electric lights connected heaven and earth. At least dozens of elites were turned into a pile of charcoal in the blink of an eye. Before the sword light disappeared, Wang Xianxiao's body had directly shortened the distance between him and Miyazawa. He held the giant sword Firmament, which was a little terrifying, in one hand, and raised the other hand. An electric arc bloomed in his hand. Wang Xianxiao's palm suddenly fell. The unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, deceiving Daoist sword. The tiny electric arc instantly extended to a distance of tens of meters, but the tiny arc seemed to illuminate everything in the base. The electric arc lit up in an instant and disappeared in an instant. Only a ray of light pierced through Gong Zei's body, which was covered in electric sparks. It was like a rainbow piercing through the sun. Miyazawa's body slightly stiffened. In the next second, his body instantly exploded, and the flesh and blood all over the sky directly evaporated in the high temperature. Only a piece of black ash fell on the ground and was instantly washed away by the rain. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the 3 attacks in Shinjuku District, Chiyo District, and the central area completely shocked the whole Dongdu. The Prime Minister's residence, the Imperial Palace, and the military all got the news. The Dongdu Self-Defense Force was safe and sound. But all the dark forces of East Island in Dongdu all took action to trace the whereabouts of the murderers of the 3 attacks. Under the wind and rain in East Island, wild waves suddenly rose. Chapter 145. It was the 3rd hour after the 3 murders in Dongdu. In the heavy rain that had lasted for a day, 2 Toyota SUVs drove out of the downtown area of Dongdu and headed for the Holy Mountain in the southwest of Dongdu with a clear purpose. The Holy Mountain was called Hibiscus Peak. It was close to the Pacific coast and covered with snow all year round. It was one of the symbols of the whole East Island and one of the largest active volcanoes in the world. It was the Holy Mountain in the hearts of all the people of East Island. The Divine Wind Force, the central organization of the Special Warfare System of East Island, was located on the Holy Mountain. The 2 off-road vehicles followed the mountain road all the way up. As the height rose, it seemed that even the rainstorm had lessened a little. In the distance where the mist was dense, the snow-covered Hibiscus Peak looked elegant and holy. However, against the backdrop of the night, there was an additional trace of gloomy beauty. The vehicles entered the mountainside, made a turn, and drove into an area that was not open to tourists on weekdays. Then they continued to go up. After 500 meters, the first sentry post appeared. Sentinels in special white military uniforms that almost blended with the snow raised their guns and stepped forward. The windows of the two cars were rolled down. Facing the sharp and vigilant sentinels, the driver did not show his ID, but only showed two badges. One was luxurious and the other was ancient. The sentinels, who were on guard, stood up straight and saluted reflexively. Without saying a word, they waved their hands to let them go. If these two badges appeared in front of ordinary soldiers, 9 out of 10 people would not recognize them. But here was the Divine Wind Force, the power center of the special warfare system of East Island, the headquarters of the most powerful and elite special warfare force in East Island. For everyone here, these two badges were worth dying for. The luxurious badge represented the office of the Prime Minister, and the ancient badge represented the royal family. Even if a beggar held these two badges, they would unreservedly offer their loyalty, even their lives. The SUVs moved forward side by side. After passing 2 more sentry posts, a snow city appeared in front of the 2 SUVs. This was indeed a city in the snow. Although the city walls were extremely short, through the rain and snow, the inside of the city walls could be said to be vast. In the center of the short city walls was a tower up to 6 or 7 meters high. On the tower, the 2 Japanese characters, Divine Wind, were as red as blood and looked very eye-catching. There were very few guards on the city wall in the heavy rain. In the center of the city gate below the tower, a figure in a tight black suit with a headscarf on his head stood quietly. He carried a katana on his back. In the white snow, the black figure was clear and blurry. At first glance, he looked like a statue standing at the city gate, ancient and silent. The 2 off-road vehicles that were about to enter the city stopped abruptly. The car door opened. 2 middle-aged men from East Island, who looked to be in their 40s or 50s, got off at the same time and walked quickly to the black figure in front of the city gate. Huge snow stepped on the snow, making a crisp sound. In front of the city gate, the black figure in black clothes suddenly opened his eyes. An indescribable sense of danger suddenly burst out from him. It was not a horrible sword intent, but a kind of tenacity and gloominess that made people breathless. His eyes were bright, but the light was extremely obscure. As the light flowed, it seemed to be full of blood and darkness. The 2 middle-aged men who were about to walk in front of him froze and subconsciously stopped 10 meters away. "Your Highness Miyamoto, why are you here?" A middle-aged man whispered in surprise, with undisguised respect in his tone. Shinichi Miyamoto, the palace master of Liohua Palace in East Island, the commander-in-chief of the Divine Wind Force, and the only supreme ninja in the martial arts world of East Island. Shinichi Miyamoto, who was in charge of the Divine Wind Force all year round, unexpectedly appeared outside the city gate in the heavy rain tonight. Obviously, he was not here to welcome them, even if they were representing the Mikado and the Prime Minister. Waiting for someone. The bright light in Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes gradually became peaceful. He stood still, letting the heavy rain fall, and said in a hoarse voice, "Matsushita and Zwaha came here late at night. Is it an order from His Majesty and the Prime Minister?" In recent years, because of the existence of night spirit in East Island, the Divine Wind Force didn't have many opportunities to go out to carry out tasks directly. Shinichi Miyamoto was not very familiar with the 2 men standing in front of him at this time, but he could vaguely remember their names. These 2 men didn't have any actual positions in the Imperial Palace and the Prime Minister's residence, but they were one of the most important aides of the Mikado and the Prime Minister. They came to Divine Wind in the rain late at night, so something important must have happened. "Yes, Your Highness Miyamoto. Something important happened in Dongdu tonight. His Majesty and the Prime Minister think it's time for the Divine Wind Force to serve East Island." Song Xiaoying lowered his head, and his tone became more and more respectful. As the confidant of the Mikado, he looked ordinary and plain, and he had a scholarly air about him that matched his identity as an aide. He was like a senior scholar, which made people feel very comfortable. He was less than 50 years old this year, and among the aides of the Mikado, he was really young and vigorous. All the information showed that within 5 years, Song Xiaoying was very likely to become the chief of the aides of the Mikado. In the whole East Island, he could be said to be a very important figure. Shinichi Miyamoto was calm and collected, and his eyes were as calm as snow. He lowered his eyelids and became quiet again. When this supreme ninja of the invincible realm was motionless, not to mention his momentum, even his vitality seemed to be completely restrained, like a dead thing. Your Highness Miyamoto, a few hours ago, there were murders in Chiyo District, Central District, and Shinjuku District. We have confirmed that, including Miyamoto Shiny Eye, 3 superiors of the Thundershocking realm have been killed in their own districts, more than 10 superiors of the Fire-Flaming realm died, and countless ordinary elites were killed and injured. There were 3 murders. At present, we can confirm that the one who killed Miyazawa Xiong in Chiyo District is Wang Xingxiao, the heir of the Wang family of Beihai. And the one who appeared in the Central District is very likely to be Gu Hanzhan, the heir of Kunlun City in Zhongzhou State. We can't confirm the murderer in Shinjuku District yet. We found some videos in Shinjuku District, and we can only confirm that the murderer is also a young man, but the specific identity is unknown. Zhua Hengxin, who came from the advisor group of the Prime Minister's residence, said in a cold tone. Different from Song Xia-ing, who looked very kind, Zhua Hengxin's face was gloomy, and his momentum was extremely cold. Although the advisors of the Prime Minister's residence did not hold specific official positions, they often handled some administrative affairs for the Prime Minister. After staying with the Prime Minister for a long time, Zhua Hengxin naturally had an unusual momentum. But at this time, standing in front of Shinichi Miyamoto, the supreme ninja of heaven, all his domineering and elegant demeanor were deliberately restrained. The Wang family of Beihai? Zhongzhou State? Shinichi Miyamoto suddenly opened his eyes, and subconsciously took a step forward. The snow under his feet was pockmarked by the rain, but the place where Shinichi Miyamoto originally stood was flat, not even a footprint, leaving no trace in the snow. Song Xia-ing and Zhua Hengxin bowed at the same time. If that's the case, things will be very troublesome. Shinichi Miyamoto took a deep breath and said slowly. The aura that he had restrained to the extreme was released slowly, as if endless darkness was falling on the holy mountain. The darkness swallowed the snow and the rain, and the whole world seemed to be in darkness. Shinichi Miyamoto looked serious. Song Xia-ing and Zhua Hengxin also looked serious. If things were really as they thought, then this time it was more than troublesome. Zhongzhou State was going to change dramatically. The governor of Samsara challenged the god of war of Zhongzhou State, which had attracted the attention of the whole world. Currently, a large number of masters and elites of East Island had all gone to Zhongzhou State. East Island's Special Warfare Force and master teams were in a state of fatal weakness. Did Zhongzhou State still have the power to plot against East Island at this time? Wang Shengxiao, Gu Hanzhan, they were the famous young heavenly sons in the whole dark world. And the third person who appeared in Shinjuku tonight, was he a hidden figure of the young generation of Zhongzhou State? Was everything that happened tonight a small, individual operation? Or a prelude to a large-scale invasion? If it was just a prelude, then it could only mean that when countless masters of East Island sneaked into Zhongzhou State, a large number of elites of Zhongzhou State also entered East Island. Once the speculation was established, Shinichi Miyamoto's face suddenly turned darker. Everyone thought that Zhongzhou State was going to change dramatically. Under such circumstances, Zhongzhou State still dared to send forces to East Island, which could only mean that it was impossible for Zhongzhou State to change dramatically. The master of Samsara Palace and the god of war of Zhongzhou State would fight, but they wouldn't fight to the death. Samsara and Zhongzhou State conspired against East Island? What about the 2 invincible realm masters and a large number of experts who had entered Zhongzhou State? The rain was pouring heavily. Shinichi Miyamoto felt cold all over. Investigate. The supreme ninja of East Island stayed silent for 5 minutes, and then said in a cold tone, investigate the movements of the 12 supermasters of Samsara and all the entry and exit records of East Island in the past month. The young heavenly sons of the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City entered East Island, and I'm afraid there are a lot of elites of Zhongzhou State with them that we haven't found. We have to find out. The divine wind force will be dispatched immediately. Mr. Songxia, Mr. Zhua, what's the order of His Majesty and the Prime Minister? Song Xiaoying paused and said slowly, His Majesty and the Prime Minister mean that we must control Wang Xingxiao, Gu Hanshan, and the young man who committed murder in Shinjuku. These three are likely to be the core of the next generation of the special warfare system of Zhongzhou State. If the worst happens, they will be very important hostages. Shinichi Miyamoto nodded expressionlessly and said, The Divine Wind Force is qualified for this task. In addition, tell His Majesty the Mikado and the Prime Minister that I suggest waking up the Kusanagi force immediately, just in case. The faces of the two top aides from the Imperial Palace and the Prime Minister's residence changed dramatically, but they didn't dare to say anything. They hurriedly turned around, got on the off-road vehicle, and left quickly. Both of them felt that it was ridiculous to wake up the Kusanagi force, but it was obvious that Shinichi Miyamoto's sense of crisis was much stronger than theirs. They had to convey this very important suggestion to their master as soon as possible. Shinichi Miyamoto watched the two off-road vehicles leave. He forcibly suppressed the urge to go back and give orders, and quietly waited where he was. The storm was howling in the air. In a very distant place, the rain seemed to tilt slightly and then stop. Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes froze, and he remained calm. The rain all over the sky seemed to be getting smaller and smaller, and finally disappeared completely 1 second later. The storm was still raining heavily in front of the city, but there seemed to be a domain around Shinichi Miyamoto, and all the rain disappeared without a trace. Miyamoto, long time no see. A soft and almost demonic voice rang out, echoing between the snow and the storm, misty and uncertain. Shinichi Miyamoto suppressed his inner agitation and said flatly, You're the #1 killer on the killer list. Now that you've come to the Divine Wind Force, don't you dare to show up in front of me? Oh, provocation doesn't work on me. This is the Divine Wind Force, and Miyamoto has opened his domain. I have to keep a low profile. Although it's a little rude, I believe Miyamoto can understand, right? The evil and soft voice continued to ring out, echoing softly between heaven and earth. The #1 killer in the Dark World and the only killer of the Invincible Realm, codenamed Evil. No one knew why he showed up in East Island, not even Shinichi Miyamoto. However, the Supreme Ninja of East Island obviously didn't have the patience to say more. He said impatiently, Evil, if you have anything to say, just say it. I don't have time to chat with you here. Heh. In the void of the rainstorm, Evil's voice echoed in Shinichi Miyamoto's ears. It's just a small matter. I want to invite Miyamoto to Zhongzhou State to help me kill someone. What do you think? Shinichi Miyamoto's heart skipped a beat, and then he sneered, Why should I help you? An inexplicable request. What if I say that the person I'm going to kill this time is completely in the interest of East Island? Evil's voice seemed to be a little lower. Once this person dies, the Samsara Palace will. The Wang family of Beihai, Kunlun City, and Sai City will all fall out with each other. Maybe this is what you want to see, right? Shinichi Miyamoto was expressionless, but his eyes narrowed. I didn't know there was such a person in Zhongzhou State. I didn't know before either. According to my employer, he only appeared recently. He's just a young ant. Evil smiled and said calmly. Shinichi Miyamoto's patience was wearing thin, and his eyes were getting colder and colder. He did not have any friendship with Evil. It was inexplicable that Evil came to him. Moreover, Evil was a young nonentity that had just appeared, but it was related to the balance of the superpowers in Zhongzhou State. Could it be more ridiculous? And even if there was such a person, how could Evil find him? It was illogical. Are you done? Shinichi Miyamoto frowned and said slowly, Don't think what I said is absurd. You should think about it. The person I'm going to kill is a nonentity, but the person behind him is not to be underestimated. Even I don't have the confidence to escape unscathed if I act alone. Miyamoto, the reason why I found you is not only to invite you to Zhongzhou State, but also to cooperate with Tianhai Wuji and Lusheng Zhangxuan through you. There's also an invincible realm expert and even a murderous weapon to cooperate with us. 5 invincible realm experts and a murderous weapon. Do you think it's a joke? Evil said calmly, The reason why I found you is that I like your ninjutsu. But what I value more is that the two invincible realm experts in East Island are in Zhongzhou State now. If this cooperation is successful, it's definitely a win-win situation. If it fails, we'll be doomed eternally. I can guarantee the authenticity of every word I say with everything I have. It depends on whether your Empire of East Island dares to gamble for the fate of the country. Of course we dare. Shinichi Miyamoto sneered. But why do I think you dare to gamble for such a dangerous plan? Evil sighed softly and said leisurely, anyone will go crazy for a reward of $10 billion, right? Maybe I can retire completely after what I did last night. $10 billion. Shinichi Miyamoto's heart shook fiercely. If what Tribulation said was true, it was enough to prove that the person he killed on this trip was really not a small matter. And how could a force that could pay $10 billion to kill a person be ordinary? A young non-entity who was related to the overall situation of Zhongzhou State? Shinichi Miyamoto took a deep breath and said calmly, who is this person? The new young heavenly son of Zhongzhou State, Li Tianlun. Evil was silent for a while and chuckled. The wind and thunder veins with unlimited potential. If I can end my last assassination with his blood and life, it will be perfect. The new young heavenly son? Li Tianlun? Wind and thunder veins? Shinichi Miyamoto's eyes twitched slightly. At this moment, he suddenly thought of the information brought by Song Xiaoying and Zhua Hengxin. Wang Shengxiao appeared in Chiu District. Gu Hanshan appeared in the central area. He appeared in Shinjuku District. He narrowed his eyes slightly and murmured to himself, can it really be such a coincidence? P.S. Well, I have to brace myself and tell you something. As the new year approaches, I'm really a little busy, so I have an idea. Last night, I told the readers in the group that during the new year, I will update once a day, which is a normal update. After the new year, I will update twice a day. Can the heroes and heroines accept this? Things are different now. Before I got married, my parents could understand my writing work. But now that I have a wife and a child, things are really different. So, this year, I really want to spend time with my family. Since I started my new book, I even have less time to sleep with my wife. I should spend time with my family before the new year and pay my New Year's greetings a few days later. I can probably update on the 5th. Chapter 146. Heavy rain poured over Dongdu. Ninghu, a few hundred kilometers away from Dongdu, had a sunny day. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Li Tianlun, who was dressed in sportswear and had become a young mute again, pulled an excessively large suitcase and walked slowly on the clean and tidy road of Ninghu. He looked like a young man traveling alone. He was ordinary and did not attract any attention along the way. The warm sunshine in the morning quietly sprinkled all over the city, making it warm and comfortable. Li Tianlun, who had abandoned the temporary car 20 kilometers away from Ninghu, walked aimlessly. When he passed by a hotel that did not look high-end but was very clean and exquisite, he stopped, thought about it, and finally walked into the hall. After checking in, he dragged his luggage upstairs. Because he had a fake but extremely realistic fake identity and a lot of yen to clear the way, although he played the role of a mute, the whole process was extremely simple and smooth, without any accident. Li Tianlun's economic suite was on the 3rd floor, a height that would not embarrass him no matter what happened. The East Island-style suite space was ordinary, but it was extremely clean and elegant. The only drawback was that it was close to the block. Although the sound insulation was good, the outside world still seemed to be a little noisy. But Li Tianlun was very satisfied with the current environment. After a fierce battle, what he needed most now was to rest from Dongdu, where it was raining cats and dogs, to the sunny Ninghu. At 9 o'clock in the morning. If there was no accident, he could sleep until dinner time, and even enjoy the world-famous Ninghu beef, and then continue to carry out hunting tasks in the dark and windy night. Throwing the suitcase aside, Li Tianlun sat on the tatami with a calm expression and took out a list again. On the list, 4 names, Sanluan Tingjing, Miyamoto Shiny Eye, Takeda Akino, and Nakamura Akame, had been drawn with a horizontal line. For Li Tianlun, it was a sign that the 4 people were dead. The remaining 26 people were his next hunting targets. Among the 4 lists that had been completed, Sanluan Tingjing and Miyamoto Shinyai could be said to be the targets that Li Tianlan deliberately went to hunt, while the remaining 2 were unexpected surprises. They were both killed by him when he rushed into the headquarters on Takeshita Street. Both of them were in the ordinary fire-flaming realm, but their positions were important. One was in charge of logistics, and the other was in charge of intelligence, so it didn't take much effort to kill them. With the death of these 4 people, the government of East Island's plan to take over all the forces of Night Spirit in East Island would undoubtedly be thwarted. Many people might not realize anything now, but as the hunting continued with the advancement of the 3 young heavenly sons of Zhongzhou State, the whole East Island would realize what kind of people they were hunting. At that time, not to mention whether someone would actively fight for the positions left by Night Spirit, even some people in the headquarters of Night Spirit who didn't want to be incorporated and lose their autonomy might have some other thoughts. Light a cigarette. Li Tianlan took a deep breath, put aside the matter of Dongdu, and began to study the list in front of him. In Ninghu, Li Tianlan was in charge of hunting for 3 people, and the most important one was Wuxia and Xianxia. Unlike the people of the Dark World and the personnel that the East Island government temporarily sent to take over Night Spirit after the destruction of Night Spirit, Wuxia and Xianxia had always been an important figure in Night Spirit, and he was also a very famous figure in East Island and even the world. Of course, Wuxia and Xianxia's fame was limited to some specific fields, such as genetics and biology. He was one of the most famous doctors in genetics and biology in the world. On the list in Li Tianlan's hand, Wuxia and Xianxia's strength was ordinary. In terms of the difficulty of assassination, it was not more difficult than killing Miyamoto Shinyai. But the credits awarded by the Sky Academy were 200 more than Miyamoto Shinyai, which showed how valuable the head of this top doctor was. Li Tianlan silently stared at the name of Wuxia and Xianxia. After a long time, he unfolded the map of Ninghu that he took in the hotel and determined the location of this action. Sensoji in the western suburbs of Ninghu. This was the address given in the information given by Han Shixuan. It was very detailed but also very vague. This ancient temple with a long history in Ninghu was the secret research institute presided over by Wuxia and Xianxia, but there was no mention of this research institute in the information. Sensoji was the only clue about Wuxia and Xianxia. A cigarette was about to burn out. Li Tianlan's fingers gently tapped on the map, without saying a word. Sensoji was about 50 kilometers away from the urban area of Ninghu. Judging from Li Tianlan's current location, there were at least a dozen roads leading to the destination. The traffic was very convenient, which also meant that Li Tianlan would not have too big a problem to retreat after he succeeded. But the biggest problem now was not how to retreat, but how to enter the Biological Research Institute under Sensoji that he did not even know the name of. Li Tianlan looked at his watch and hesitated. He did not know if he should go to Sensoji first. Sensoji in Ninghu was one of the tourist attractions. If he went there during the day, even if he could gain something, it would be extremely limited. He pinched out the cigarette butt and gave up the idea of going to Sensoji. He lay on the tatami and closed his eyes to rest. When he was half asleep, the phone in the suite rang. Li Tianlan frowned, turned over and continued to sleep. Time flew by in a trance. About an hour later, the sound of knocking on the door suddenly came from outside the door. The rhythm was very light, and it sounded a little cautious. Li Tianlan, who slept very lightly but deeply, opened his eyes immediately. The silver human emperor had slipped out of his cuff. Li Tianlan was expressionless. When he was about to ask who it was, he suddenly realized that he was now a mute. He narrowed his eyes slightly, stood up quietly, walked to the door and opened it. An East Island girl, who looked about 27 or 28 years old, stood in front of the door and looked at Li Tianlan. She blushed and seemed to be a little nervous. This was a woman who could be regarded as extremely beautiful in most people's eyes. Her hair was dyed a very simple and elegant gray, and the outline of her face was soft and charming. She wore a tight-waist shirt, which completely showed off her slender waist and plump chest. She wore a short skirt, seductive mesh stockings on her tender white thighs, and a pair of black stilettos on her feet. A faint fragrance floated into Li Tianlan's nostrils. The woman's small hand was holding a delicate and simple lady's bag, and she whispered, "Is this the service you ordered?" It was a very soft and coquettish Japanese, which sounded a little sweet and charming. Li Tianlan frowned slightly. He couldn't speak, so he just shook his head coldly and was about to close the door. "Please wait a minute." The woman's face seemed to be a little panicked. She stretched out an arm to stop Li Tianlan, bit her lip and whispered, "Sir, I'm very clean and I'm a wife. My skills are very good, and I can definitely make you happy. If you're not satisfied with me, Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes slightly, suddenly opened the door a little, and motioned for her to come in. The woman was stunned again, and subconsciously looked at Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan pointed to his mouth, indicating that he couldn't speak, and stood in the door to make way for her. The woman hesitated a little, held the lady's bag in her hand, and stepped into the bedroom with a fragrant wind in her high heels. The woman entered the room, put the bag aside, turned around, bit her lip, looked at Li Tianlan, and said softly and obediently, "Shall we start now?" Her face was flushed, and she looked anxious and shy. "I can use my mouth first. I'd better take off my clothes first." Li Tianlan nodded with a calm expression. The woman seemed to be a little shy. She turned around and bowed her head to unbutton her shirt. Her long hair hung down, revealing a section of her tender white neck, which looked extremely attractive. Li Tianlan walked over and gently stroked her neck. The woman's body stiffened, and her face became redder. Her palms, which were unbuttoning, trembled slightly. "Nice appearance, but you have killing intent." Li Tianlan's voice suddenly sounded in the quiet room, where only the woman's rapid breathing was left, and he spoke in perfect Chinese. Before he finished his words, the face of the woman, who bowed her head to unbutton her shirt, had changed dramatically. As soon as Li Tianlan said, "Nice," she suddenly turned around. In an instant, Li Tianlan's palm pressed against her neck, but he caught nothing. The third button on the woman's shirt was unbuttoned. She reached out with both hands and had taken out 2 daggers glowing with a strange green light. "Turn around." Li Tianlan had just finished his words. Both of them were extremely fast. The moment the woman turned around, the human emperor in Li Tianlan's hand had slightly wrapped around her body. It was not a spear or a sword. The slender spearhead stuck out the metal copper. The human emperor directly turned into a dagger. The human emperor thrust. Swish! Before the woman's figure with the 2 knives in her hand stabilized, the human emperor thrust had been fiercely stabbed into the woman's abdomen. Li Tianlan's expression was cold, and the human emperor turned slightly. Crack! In the crisp sound of metal, the human emperor thrust trembled slightly, and the blades on both sides of the spearhead stretched directly into the woman's body. Li Tianlan's hands were always stable, and his eyes were fierce and cold. In an instant he directly pulled out the dagger. In an instant, there was a huge strange-shaped hole in the woman's abdomen, and blood gushed out of her mouth. She stared at Li Tianlan with a pair of eyes that were originally soft and affectionate but now full of ferocity, and said, You have too many doubts." Li Tianlan said flatly, "I told you, you have killing intent." He raised his eyebrows slightly, looked at the woman in front of him, and asked, "Do you know the Heavenly King Heart?" The woman's eyes were full of understanding. She took a deep breath, let the blood gush out of her body, and pounced on him without hesitation. The fire in the room instantly bloomed, but it was not a blazing orange, but a very strange kind of pale green. Her body swelled up rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, she seemed to be several times bigger. In the expanding body, there was a muffled sound in her body, and the whole person exploded in an instant. The pale green flame was completely out of control in an instant, madly devouring everything in the room. Countless green juice burst out of the woman's body, completely enveloping Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan's body shook. Countless green juice passed through his body. But Li Tianlan's real body had already appeared behind the woman. He pulled up the large suitcase in the room that contained the sky attack. Without hesitation, he strode a few steps, broke the window, and jumped directly from the 3rd floor. In a messy sound of breaking, Li Tianlan dragged the suitcase to the ground with countless broken glass. Behind him, The green flame with strange light and shadow had spread and burned all over the third floor. Li Tianlan straightened up and began to run without looking back. He carried a huge suitcase, supported himself with one hand, stepped over the roadside railing, and rose into the air. A silver-white Lexus drove across the road in an instant. Li Tianlan stomped hard on the roof of the Lexus. Shadow formula transposition. In the next second, Li Tianlan had already appeared on the other side of the road. He carried the suitcase and left the scene at full speed without stopping. Until his figure appeared on the other side of the street, around the hotel, some figures that seemed to stay nearby unintentionally suddenly came to their senses. Chase. In a subconscious silence, a cold and resolute voice suddenly sounded. At the main entrance of the hotel, a middle-aged man in a suit and leather shoes, who looked like a business elite, tore off his suit jacket. His figure flashed, and almost in the blink of an eye, he crossed the whole block and chased after Li Tianlan. In the full sprint, he took out a walkie-talkie and said quickly to the other end of the walkie-talkie, "Target confirmed. Blue sportswear, carrying a large suitcase, silver hair. All teams pay attention to interception and block this block." He paused and sped up again, saying, "Get the helicopter." Li Tianlan carried the large suitcase and walked like the wind, constantly changing positions with the shadow formula. In a few minutes, he was getting farther and farther away from the pursuers behind him. But he didn't relax at all. Instead, he became more and more serious. East Island. At this moment, he realized that he still underestimated the power of the East Island Special Warfare System. From Dongdu to Ninghu, a distance of hundreds of kilometers. In less than 12 hours, the East Island Special Warfare System had already locked his position. Needless to say, now that he was running away, Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanshan must be in a bad situation. It was really not so easy to fight with the special warfare system of a country. To put it simply, after the initial hunting, they were exposed. The street was full of people. Li Tianlan quickly passed through a block. Vaguely, there seemed to be more and more figures blocking his way. They passed through from all directions, and in a very short time, they seemed to have surrounded Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan's eyes were cold. He held the human emperor tightly in his hand and was about to fight his way out. In his ears, the roar of a car engine had sounded quickly. A black Mercedes-Benz rushed over in an almost reckless manner, knocking down 2 East Island residents on the side of the road, and finally stopped in front of Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Chapter 147. Get in the car. I can help you. Li Tianlan instinctively froze for a moment. The woman in the back row of the Mercedes-Benz looked about 26 or 27 years old. Her face was charming and soft, and her whole body was full of a mature and intellectual dignity. The streets of Ninghu were already in chaos. Countless elites of the Special Warfare System of East Island were rushing over from different directions, and some of them even took out weapons. But the woman in the car was always calm and looked at Li Tianlan with extremely sincere eyes. The woman's voice was soft and sweet, but the sweet Japanese fell into Li Tianlan's ears, and after being translated into Chinese, it became a mechanical and rigid tone. She was from East Island. This was the first thought that came to Li Tianlan's mind. In the chaotic street, inside and outside the car, the two people looked at each other. The next second, without any hesitation, Li Tianlan opened the door and sat in the car. The black Mercedes-Benz roared, and the sudden speed made Li Tianlan's body stick to the seat behind him. The whole car seemed to fly in an instant, and the ground of the car seemed to be lowering. The scenery on both sides of the window kept going backward and became blurred. Vaguely, Li Tianlan saw through the dashboard that the speed of the Mercedes-Benz had exceeded 150 miles per hour in just a few seconds. As a bumpkin who knew nothing about cars dozens of days ago, Li Tianlan couldn't imagine what kind of violent modification this car had gone through to have the performance that was even more exaggerated than most supercars. The Mercedes-Benz dashed left and right in the traffic on Ninghu Street. The performance of the car was good, and the driver was obviously a professional. Li Tianlan only felt that the car kept swaying on the street, and the huge car shuttled through the gaps in the traffic in a very dexterous manner. In just a few minutes, Li Tianlan had been farther and farther away from the place where he had just been besieged. The scene outside the window was still going backward quickly. Li Tianlan looked at the dashboard in front of him. The speed was 302. Damn it, this speed is almost like flying. The scene on the street gradually changed from noisy to quiet. Along the clean road, the Mercedes-Benz continued to move forward. The woman, who hadn't taken the initiative to speak since Li Tianlan got in the car, finally turned her head, looked at Li Tianlan, and said with a smile, "Thank you for your trust, Mr. Li. You made the best choice." Li Tianlan glanced at the woman and said nothing. Trust? This was complete nonsense. The reason why Li Tianlan dared to get in the car was that he could be sure that even if the worst happened, he could still escape. The car sped along the way, but neither the driver nor the woman beside him noticed that as the car continued to accelerate, there was always a patch of crystal clear and even water following the Mercedes-Benz. After entering the ice-condensing realm, Xuehua was Li Tianlan's shadow. As long as there was any danger, Xuehua would turn into his shadow and switch places with Li Tianlan. The whole process didn't even take a second. If he hadn't had great confidence in his own safety, he wouldn't have easily trusted the woman beside him whom he had never met, even if he had fought his way out. Let me introduce myself. My name is Shitian Mingzi. Mr. Li can call me Mingzi. The woman smiled gently and reached out a small hand to Li Tianlan. I don't think I need to introduce myself? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly and shook Shitian Mingzi's hand. She called him Mr. Li as soon as she opened her mouth. It seemed meaningless whether he introduced himself or not. Of course. Shitian Mingzi's eyes were coquettish, and there was a kind of obvious fanaticism and worship in them. It was a kind of charming look that people knew was fake, but it could make people believe it. The third young heavenly son of Zhongzhou State, Li Tianlan of Sai City. Almost everyone in East Island who should know about your current identity already knows about it. Of course, that includes our Shitian clan. Li Tianlan's heart suddenly sank, but he didn't show any panicked expression. At times like this, he had to be calm. He calmly glanced at Shitian Mingzi and said with a smile, "You moved fast enough." "It's not difficult," Shitian Mingzi said indifferently. "After all, this is East Island. I can only say that we didn't expect Zhongzhou State to have such a big plan. If I'm not mistaken, you three young heavenly sons are only part of it. Zhongzhou State, there should be a large part of the elites that have secretly sneaked into East Island, right? So, the chaos in Zhongzhou State that the Dark World cares about, and the challenge of the Lord of Samsara City to the God of War of Zhongzhou State, is just a hoax, right?" Li Tianlan was expressionless and said nothing. He didn't know much about this kind of thing. Even if he knew all about it, he had no comment. Mr. Li, Shitian Mingzi frowned. Her frown was very subtle, which made her look more delicate and charming. "This problem is very important to Shitian clan, so please tell us the truth." She sat in the car, bowed deeply, and said softly and respectfully, "Please. In return, I will tell you a very important news. Believe me, this news is very important to you." Shitian clan? Li Tianlan heard the surname again and felt it was more and more familiar. He frowned thoughtfully. "My father is Shitianingji," Shitian Mingzi said softly. Shitianingji. Li Tianlan's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly became enlightened. He had indeed heard of this clan and this name. Before the hunting operation began, Han Shixuan emphasized on introducing this name. The name Shitian clan, in Han Shixuan's mouth, was Shitian Financial Group. It was one of the youngest consortiums in East Island and the largest ATM of Night Spirit in East Island. With the destruction of Night Spirit, the Logistics Department of the Divine Wind Force and the Ministry of Finance of East Island had sent officials to Shitian Financial Group and were negotiating with Shitianingji. This was all the information Li Tianlan got. Li Tianlan's eyes flickered. If the identity of Shitian Mingzi was true, then there was no doubt that East Island, the youngest world-class consortium, had been a little restless after the destruction of Night Spirit. At least, they were not willing to accept the status quo that the consortium was controlled by the Divine Wind Force and the Ministry of Finance. That was why Shitian Mingzi contacted him. Is the situation in Zhongzhou State so important to Shitian clan? Li Tianlan smiled. So what if that battle is true? So what if it's false? Shitian Mingzi gently bit her pink and tender lips. In the case of asking for help, she had no initiative at all. She could only lower her eyes and say, after this battle, if the master of Samsara Palace is safe and sound, Shitian Financial Group is willing to provide economic support for Samsara. Li Tianlan suddenly turned his head and looked at Shitian Mingzi with burning eyes. Shitian Mingzi also looked at him with a firm look. Shitian Financial Group provided economic support for Samsara? What did this mean? Treason? Li Tianlan looked at the woman beside him for a full minute, then slightly raised his eyebrows and said, in fact, long before the destruction of Night Spirit, my father had begun to apply for Swiss citizenship. We just left Night Spirit, not treason. For many years, Night Spirit has been trying to get out of the control of the East Island government. His Highness Tianxin moving the headquarters to Billy State is a good example. Night Spirit and East Island seem to be in harmony, but the fight in the dark is extremely cruel. Shitian Mingzi whispered. Li Tianlan's eyes had narrowed tightly. Vaguely, he seemed to have grasped some of the core veins of Zhongzhou State's plot. But the idea flashed in his mind, and then it became untraceable. Go on. His body leaned against the seat and he said calmly, after the destruction of Night Spirit, from the perspective of the cabinet, the first thing they want to get is Shitian Financial Group. At present, the negotiation between the government and the family is still going on. If there is no accident, the government will buy nearly 50% of the shares of Shitian Financial Group at a very low price and become the first shareholder of the consortium. Everything of Shitian clan will shrink countless times. My father has been serving Night Spirit in recent years, and in the secret game between Night Spirit and East Island for many years, my father has offended a lot of people. Once the control of Shitian Financial Group falls into the hands of the government will definitely be happy for other forces to hit Shitian Financial Group when it is down. At that time, what awaits us will be a disaster. Shitian Mingzi whispered, so we are willing to choose Samsara. Samsara Palace is a force that has just risen in the dark world in recent years, but the palace master is a real super expert and the boss most worthy of our service. If the battle between Her Highness and the God of War of Zhongzhou State is false, then it is true that Samsara and Zhongzhou State conspired against East Island. In other words, Samsara is also one of the super forces in the dark world that least needs to care about East Island. Such a force is most likely to be willing to accept Shitian Financial Group. Li Tianlan was silent. After a long time, he looked out of the window and said calmly, you made the right choice. He couldn't fully trust Shitian Mingzi now, but it didn't matter to give her some signals that were irrelevant to the overall situation. Shitian Mingzi's eyes lit up slightly, and she keenly grasped the information contained in Li Tianlan's words. She bowed deeply again and said seriously, thank you, Mr. Li. She paused and said again, we know that you have a very close relationship with Boss Qin of Samsara. If you can, I hope you can help Shitian Financial Group to reach a cooperation with Samsara. Please. Li Tianlan didn't say anything, but chuckled and said, Miss Mingzi, I remember you just said that you would tell me a very important news for me, yes. Shitian Mingzi's face tightened subconsciously. She took a deep breath and lowered her voice, saying, Tianlan, you must be careful in the next action. At present, the Divine Wind Force has all gone down the Holy Mountain and is tracking down all the infiltrators from Zhongzhou State to East Island. You, Wang Xianxia and Gu Hanshan are the top priority of the Divine Wind Force. Your assassination target is too obvious. Combining some of the dead people, some people have concluded that Zhongzhou State wants to attack everything left by Night Spirit in East Island. Unfortunately, the Divine Wind Force has already made targeted arrangements for these situations. She took a deep breath, and her plump chest swelled slightly. The invincible realm expert in East Island, Supreme Ninja Shinichi Miyamoto, even suggested the Mikado and the Prime Minister to directly wake up the Kusanagi force, but they refused. But I have a really reliable news that His Highness Shinichi Miyamoto is likely to personally carry out the obliteration plan this time. The 3 young heavenly sons of Zhongzhou State are all on his obliteration list, and you. If the intelligence is correct, you should be the first on His Highness Miyamoto's obliteration list. An invincible realm expert personally carried out the obliteration operation? Li Tenlan subconsciously tightened his body, and his expression was solemn. Tenlan, if I'm not mistaken, you came to Ninghu to attack Senso-de, right? Shi Tianmingzi sighed softly and continued, I don't know if your country's intelligence infiltration is not thorough or if there are other reasons. I just want to say that if you act alone in Sensodra, you will almost certainly die. You should have a list in your hand, right? If the person who gave you this list knew a little about Sensodra, he would not have let you carry out this action. She paused and said calmly, the other party obviously doesn't intend to let you go back alive. Li Tianlan smiled, but subconsciously clenched his hands. The one who gave him this hunting list, it was Yi Fengqing, the general of the Southeast Group. Is there anything special about Sensodera? Li Tianlan asked. Chapter 148. Unlike Sensoji in Dongdatai district, Sensoji on the outskirts of Ninghu was a real small temple. As one of the tourist attractions of Ninghu, Sensoji was bustling during the day, but at night, the whole area around Sensoji looked extremely cold. At 12 o'clock in the evening, a convoy of 6 Toyotas slowly approached the gate of Sensoji. None of the 6 cars turned on the lights, but they moved slowly in the faint light of the daytime running lights. They moved very slowly and looked a little sneaky. In the back row of the Toyota in the middle of the convoy, Li Tianlan sat quietly and looked at the gate of Sensoji getting closer and closer. His expression was indifferent, but his eyes flashed with cold light. The Underground Research Institute of Sensoji could be said to be the most important hunting target of his trip to Ninghu. But to be honest, at the beginning, Li Tianlan did not pay much attention to Sensoji. His current realm could be said to stay in the stabilization phase of the fire-flaming realm. Although there was a big realm that was promoted by drugs, it was a little superficial. But in terms of real combat capability, he had the wind and thunder veins, the chi-controlling realm of the pseudo-invincible realm, the Buddhist incantation of 9 words, the unique skill of the Li family. With so many unique conditions accumulated on him, his current combat capability could absolutely exceed everyone's expectations. Under the invincible realm, he might not be able to beat some experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, but it was not difficult for him to leave. He came to Sensoji to assassinate an internationally renowned ordinary scholar. Even if the Underground Research Institute of Sensoji was heavily guarded, it would not be more difficult than assassinating Miyamoto Shinyai. At worst, he could kill Dubian Xiangyuan and leave. The other 2 relatively unimportant targets could be killed in the future. But after getting the news from Shi Tianmingzi, Li Tianlan realized that Sensoji was definitely not a simple place. According to Shi Tianmingzi, coming to Sensoji this time was tantamount to stepping into a trap that would surely kill him. But killing Dubian Xiangyuan was not the most difficult task on his hunting list. Was it because the intelligence of Zhongzhou State was not in place? Or did Yi Fengqing really have other plans? Li Tianlan took a deep breath, and his eyes looking out of the window became deeper and deeper. He did not have much contact with Yi Fengqing in the Sky Academy, or even very little. But from the bottom of his heart, Li Tianlan did not have a bad impression of the frivolous and unruly middle-aged man. If he knew the situation of Sensoji and deliberately assigned this hunting target to him, it was simply his intention to kill. Enemies? Or leaders and teachers? Li Tianlan was a little tired. The national plan should have been a situation of unity among all parties in Zhongzhou State. In this situation, if someone really had ulterior motives, it was absolutely a very disgusting thing. So after hearing Shi Tianmingzi's description of Sensodo, Li Tianlan had a rage in his heart that seemed to be about to burst out for a whole day. The Research Institute Underground of Sensoji was codenamed Black Sunday. Its total area was not large. The upper and lower floors added up to an area of less than 10,000 square meters. However, the interior of the Research Institute used countless special alloys. A large number of offensive weapons were hidden in each key corridor. From the entrance to the core area of the Research Institute, There were nearly 30 alloy gates with a thickness of 3 to 5 meters. All of them required passwords, fingerprints, and pupil verification. Under normal circumstances, Li Tianlan would be trapped inside if he could not even pass the first gate. What's more, according to Shijian Mingzi, there was a small group of Kusanagi force in the research institute. Shijian Mingzi was vague about the Kusanagi force. She didn't mean to hide it, but she didn't know much about this top-secret force in East Island. She only said a few words and some speculations. It was extremely confusing, but Li Tianlan understood one sentence. Shijian Mingzi said that the Kusanagi force was a truly invincible team. A closed space, an invincible team, and many obstacles. This was simply an impossible hunting operation. If Shijian Mingzi or the Shijian Financial Group hadn't appeared, he might have been trapped in the Black Sun Institute now. Li Tianlan silently lit a cigarette, and the sharpness of his body grew colder. Tianlan, are you sure you want me to enter the Black Sun Institute with you? In the car, Shijian Mingzi's serious and cold voice sounded. The charm on the face of the wealthy daughter of the Shijian family had completely disappeared, and her eyes looking at Li Tianlan were full of seriousness and coldness. You don't dare? Li Tianlan asked calmly. As he spoke, the smoke of the cigarette wantonly drifted to Shijian Mingzi's face. It's not that I don't dare. Shijian Mingzi shook her head calmly. It's just that it's not necessary. You've already gotten the reset password of the Research Institute. The Black Sun Research Institute is basically defenseless to you now. My strength is not high. If I act with you, if anything happens, I'm likely to be a burden to you. I still insist on my opinion. Maybe it's the right choice for me to stay here to support you, if you trust me. I'm sorry. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at Shijian Mingzi's graceful face. He said with a faint smile, I can't trust you. I did get the reset password of the institute, but I can't guarantee that you don't have another password with higher authority. He waved his hand and said expressionlessly, I believe in the sincerity of the Shijian Financial Group, and you have a good reason to turn to Samsara, but I can't trust you. You can think of it as me being timid and afraid of death, but you must enter the Black Sun Institute with me. This is not timidity. Shijian Mingzi frowned and whispered, You are too suspicious. Li Tianlan smoked the cigarette and remained calm. What if I insist on my opinion and stay here? Shijian Mingzi looked at Li Tianlan quietly and suddenly asked. Li Tianlan stopped smoking, turned around, and looked at Shijian Mingzi. The two looked at each other in silence, and the atmosphere in the carriage suddenly became a little depressed. After a long time, Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said faintly, I can't let anyone who may control my life and death escape from my control, even if the possibility is low. So, if I insist on staying here, I will kill all of you and then enter the Black Sun Institute by myself. You may have the password in your hand, or you may not. You may harm me or you may not. But as long as you are dead, all these possibilities will not exist. The atmosphere froze in an instant. Shijian Mingzi even had a feeling that she couldn't breathe in an instant. Until Li Tianlan's cigarette burned out, she took a deep breath and said coldly, Tianlan, Shijian Financial Group is not malicious to you. The reset password in your hand is indeed the highest authority. We will not harm you. Aren't you afraid of killing the wrong person? If Shijian clan can prove its position afterward, I will apologize to you for my actions. Li Tianlan said, Apologize? What was the use of apologizing when he was dead? Shijian Mingzi bit her lip. In her sight, through the dim light, Li Tianlan's face was clear and blurry. His thin lips were tightly pursed, and there seemed to be infinite determination and indifference. Shijian Mingzi suddenly thought of an old saying of Zhongzhou State. I'd rather betray the world than let the world betray me. The motorcade stopped less than 100 meters away from Sensoji Temple. The headlights were completely out. Li Tianlan threw the cigarette butt out of the car, looked at Shijian Mingzi, and said with a smile, Are you coming with me? He knew the sincerity of the Shijian clan. At present, Shijian Ingji, the controller of the Shijian Financial Group, had been secretly placed under house arrest by the Divine Wind Force and the Ministry of Finance in Dongdu. Shijian Mingzi's brother was also on the house arrest list. Of course, this kind of house arrest was not compulsory, and nothing could be seen on the surface. Shi Mingzi was able to evade the heavy attention and successfully contact Li Tianlan with nearly 20 family elites. She also announced her position and leaked some secret information. From this point of view, there was no problem for the Shitian clan to have the intention to turn to samsara. But Li Tianlan did not dare to gamble, and he could not gamble. He had borne too much, so once anything that threatened him appeared, he would not hesitate to extinguish it at all costs. Yes. Shi Mingzi glanced at Li Tianlan and finally bowed, her tone soft. In the night, the two got out of the car at the same time and quickly rushed to Sensoji Temple 100 meters away under the hazy moonlight. The small wooden door of the temple was closed tightly. Li Tianlan and Shi Mingzi jumped over the wall and entered silently. Shi Mingzi made a gesture to Li Tianlan, indicating that they should act separately. At this point, Li Tianlan was not afraid that Shi Mingzi would escape. He nodded slightly and went straight to the small courtyard of the abbot in the intelligence. Sensoji Temple was not big, and there were only 3 monks in the whole temple. The abbot was in the fire-flaming realm, and the 2 apprentices had just entered the ice-condensing realm. This was the guard force of the Black Sun Institute on the ground. It was not small, but in Li Tianlan's eyes, it was not big. The small courtyard of the abbot was located at the back of the temple. As soon as Li Tianlan stepped into the courtyard, a bright Daoist light had already spilled out. In the knife light, there was a very sharp cry, "Who?" Li Tianlan dodged the knife light. He didn't bother to say a word, and the silver swords lit up in an instant. In the bright knife light, a little flame had just risen and disappeared. Li Tianlan's figure had appeared outside the courtyard and went straight to the central hall. The entrance switch of the Black Sun Institute was located at the 3rd knuckle of the left hand of the Buddha statue in the hall. When Li Tianlan opened the mechanism, Shi Mingzi's figure just appeared in the hall. The floor in front of Li Tianlan was separated, and an entrance of about 2 meters appeared directly in front of the two. The passage behind the entrance extended all the way down, and the light was soft and bright. Li Tianlan looked at Shi Mingzi calmly and said calmly, "Go down." Shi Mingzi's eyes were complicated. She gritted her teeth and walked directly into the passage. Li Tianlan followed closely and entered the passage. They had just walked less than 10 meters when the cracked floor behind them had automatically closed. The internal switch is in lab number 1. Tianlan, reset the password now. Shi Mingzi said softly. Li Tianlan quietly looked at the Black Sun Institute in front of him. What appeared in front of them was a corridor with a metallic luster. The rooms in the corridor were juxtaposed, looking solemn and awe-inspiring. The metal walls reflected a soft luster. Being in it, everything around them seemed to be brighter than ever. Li Tianlan took out something like a remote control from his pocket and pressed a series of numbers. Crack! In the Black Sun Institute, the sound of metal crashing sounded. The light in the institute dimmed for a moment, and then it was bright again. Shi Mingzi led the way in front, pressed the elevator that went straight to the 2nd floor downstairs, and strolled leisurely. The Black Sun Institute was an important part of the Night Spirit organization. Shitian Financial Group was also an important part of Night Spirit. And the best thing was that Shitian Financial Group was a very famous technology consortium in the whole East Island and even the whole Asia. In other words, a large number of alloys and all kinds of exquisite designs in the Black Sun Institute were made by Shitian Financial Group. Some of the weapons inside were also put in by Shitian Financial Group. As for the reset password in Li Tianlan's hand, it was set a long time ago. It was a task personally assigned by Tian Exin, one of the dominators of Night Spirit. From this, it could be seen how fierce the battle between Night Spirit and the East Island government had been over the years. With this reset password, everything in the Black Sun Institute was equivalent to nothing to Li Tianlan. If Li Tianlan hadn't met Shi Mingzi today, even if he rushed here, he would probably be trapped to death. The elevator went from the 1st floor to the 2nd floor. Shi Mingzi looked calm and led the way first. The environment on the 2nd floor was the same as on the 1st floor, but there were fewer rooms. There was a sense of precision science fiction everywhere. Shi Tianmingzi took Li Tianlan to an alloy door in the central area, turned to look at Li Tianlan, and said in a serious tone, "Tianlan, remember, kill in one blow. Kill in one blow." These 4 words were even directly related to the success or failure of their trip. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and looked at the alloy door in front of him. Without hesitation, he kicked it out directly. Boom! The whole floor seemed to be shaking, and the alloy door was kicked open under the tremendous force. The 2 swords in Li Tianlan's hands were dazzling, and his whole body had quickly rushed into the number 1 laboratory of the Black Sun Institute. Shi Tianmingzi followed closely behind. "Who is it?" A roar of shock and anger suddenly sounded. In Shi Tianmingzi's sight, the whole laboratory was instantly filled with a large area of bright lightning. A middle-aged man in a kimono, with lightning all over his body, had stopped Li Tianlan at the first time. Behind the middle-aged man, an old man in a research suit quickly retreated after a slight daze. Boom! Li Tianlan and the middle-aged man fought in an instant. Under the full blow, Li Tianlan retreated a few steps, while the middle-aged man was directly blown out. "Doctor, hurry up!" The middle-aged man spat out blood and shouted with horror in his eyes. There was no need for him to speak at all. The old man, who kept retreating, had already opened his mouth to speak. Dongdu, Pegasus, Beihai, divine wind, setting sun. Words came out of the old man's mouth one by one. Crack! In the corner of the laboratory, the 3 statues that originally stood side by side began to shake in an instant, and countless dense cracks began to appear on the statues. Loyalty, fearlessness, blood, invincibility. Shi Tianmingzi's expression changed dramatically. Chapter 149. In the new year, I wish everyone a happy new year. May all your wishes come true. Well, nothing is better than the words, all your wishes come true. All your wishes come true, all your wishes come true. Li Tianlan didn't know what was going on, but the moment Wuxia and Xianxia stepped back and spat out the words, he had already noticed that something was wrong. The words were completely inexplicable when translated into Chinese. The pronunciation in Japanese was indescribably weird. The old tone kept echoing in the research institute. Li Tianlan instinctively sensed an extremely dangerous and strange aura. Flying fire, quicksand, polar bear, trample. The old tone sounded in a hurry and without interruption. Without hesitation, Li Tianlan rushed straight to Wuxia and Xianxia. One advanced and the other retreated. The distance of more than 20 meters between them was instantly shortened. The human emperor sword shone, and the surging sword intent gathered in front of Wuxia and Xianxia, completely enveloping him in an instant. In the blink of an eye, Wuxia and Xianxia's whole body was filled with bright electric light. The electric light and the sword qi intertwined quickly in front of Wuxia and Xianxia. The old scholar's body was already covered in blood, and the red blood splashed on his white research uniform. It was a shocking sight. The thunder-shocking realm expert who was defeated by Li Tianlan in a very short time had desperately rushed toward Li Tianlan. The lightning on his body was flashing intensely, and the whole research room had turned into a dazzling and deep light blue. The lightning passed through Li Tianlan's body, but it did not attack him. Instead, it built layers of defense in front of Wuxia and Xianxia. The sword light became sharper. The lightning became more dazzling. The two intertwined with each other, and the sharp sword intent tore everything apart. But time passed quickly. Missing, fish and shrimp, floating light, youth. Wuxia and Xianxia kept stepping back, and his eyes were fixed on Li Tianlan, but it was not a kind of anger and disgust for the intruder. His eyes were calm but fanatical, with an extremely contradictory expectation. The lightning on his body was getting weaker and weaker, but his tone was getting higher and higher. Billow, giant wave, misty rain, sunset. Boom! In the laboratory, the 3 statues kept shaking with the words, and countless cracks spread all over their bodies. Crack! A large piece of stone skin fell off. Vaguely, the silhouettes of 3 people appeared in the research institute. Shi Tianmingzi was in a daze, and her face was full of fear and despair. Li Tianlan didn't know what all this meant, but she had already guessed the truth. As the strongest force in East Island, the existence of the Kusanagi force had always been a top secret. If it weren't for some special reasons, the daughter of a top wealthy family like Shitian Mingzi wouldn't know the existence of the Kusanagi force at all. But even so, she didn't know much about this highly secretive force in East Island. She only vaguely knew that the establishment of the Kusanagi force had an inseparable relationship with Night Spirit and Shitian Financial Group. This was an almost invincible force. Just a few days ago, she got the news again. The Kusanagi force needed to be awakened. Awakening, to put it coldly, was equivalent to activation. The words that Dubian Xiangyuan said were probably the activation codes of the Kusanagi force. In the research institute, all kinds of lights flickered, and the sharp edge almost filled the entire space, but Shitian Mingzi's eyes became more and more frightened. The whole plan had a serious accident when they rushed into the laboratory. Normally, the Black Sun Institute could be said to be the most dangerous place on Li Tianlan's hunting list, but after getting the reset password provided by Shitian Mingzi, it would also become the easiest point. There were a lot of high-tech weapons here, but there were basically no elites guarding here. There were only dozens of scholars and researchers, and a small group of the Kusanagi force. And the Kusanagi force needed to be awakened. So as long as they killed Dubian Xiangyuan, who had the complete password, as soon as they rushed into the laboratory, they didn't need to care about the threat of the Kusanagi force at all. That was what Shitian Mingzi said before they entered the laboratory. But neither she nor Li Tianlan expected that there was a second person in the laboratory besides Dubian Xiangyuan. And he was an expert close to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. Shitian Mingzi had seen this middle-aged man. He was one of the top executives in the Divine Wind Force, General Fujiwara Ping. Why did he show up here? Li Tianlan was the young heavenly son of Zhongzhou State, but after all, his real realm was only the fire-flaming realm. In the face of an expert close to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, even if he could win, he couldn't kill him in seconds. During this period of time, it was enough for Dubian Xiangyuan to activate a small team of the Kusanagi force in the laboratory. Fujiwara Ping. This was the biggest variable of this trip. Sunset. As soon as the last word came out, a stiff but extremely loud voice had covered the whole laboratory in an instant, wild and indifferent. In the laboratory, the stone skin of the three statues had completely fallen off, and countless lime fell to the ground. Under the stone skin, three figures, each more than 2 meters tall, took a step forward and said, "The password is correct. Number 9, protect me. Number 7, number 8, kill him." Without hesitation, Dubian Xiangyuan pointed at Li Tianlan and gave a direct order. The lightning in front of him had almost been completely twisted and disappeared by the sword light. Blood bloomed from every corner of his body, making him look extremely miserable. Li Tianlan's long sword shook. When he was about to stab Dubian Xiangyuan in front of him, Fujiwara Ping behind him had rushed over and clasped his shoulders with both hands. Blood flowed from the corner of the mouth of this high-level member of the Divine Wind Force, and his breath was weak. Just now, protecting Dubian Xiangyuan with all his strength seemed to have consumed most of the strength of this thunder-shocking realm expert. He gasped hard and sneered, "You're dead." Li Tianlan withdrew his long sword and turned around without hesitation to hit him with his elbow. Bang! Fujiwara Ping had already consumed most of his strength, and he barely blocked it. His whole body was suddenly hit and flew out. The sound of bones breaking rang out, accompanied by Fujiwara Ping's miserable groan. One of his arms was obviously broken. Blood came out from Li Tianlan's 2 shoulders. Li Tianlan frowned slightly and looked at the several bloody holes on his shoulders caused by Fujiwara Ping. Before he had time to react, the piercing sound of something breaking through the air suddenly sounded behind him. The Kusanagi force. Li Tianlan had no time to care about Fujiwara Ping. He suddenly turned around, and the moment his body retreated and pulled away, he stabbed straight with his sword. The raging fire flew up on the sword edge. The sword energy surged. In an instant, Li Tianlan seemed to be surrounded by fire. One after another, the long swords condensed from flames floated around him. As he stabbed straight with his sword, countless sword shadows rushed to the two burly figures in front of him at the same time. Charge! Li Tianlan rushed forward. The two figures also rushed forward at the same time. The distance was 5 meters. The two sides instantly got closer. For the first time, Li Tianlan officially saw the Kusanagi force that he had just heard of. Number 7, Number 8, and Number 9. Number 9 was standing beside Wuxia and Xianxia at this time, watching all this coldly and motionlessly. Number 7 and Number 8 were in charge of attacking. Not to mention in East Island, where people were short, even if they were in any place, their figures could be said to be really tough. They were more than 2 meters tall, bald, and their faces without eyebrows and beards, which made their not ugly appearance look extremely weird. What was even weirder was their eyes. They were mechanical and numb, but there was an unparalleled fierce light in them. The muscles all over their bodies bulged as if they were about to explode. Their bodies looked very cumbersome, but they were extremely flexible in their movements. The most important thing was that they seemed to be fearless and ignore everything. The two heavy bodies ran wildly in the laboratory, and the whole ground was trembling slightly. In the face of the blazing fire and sword shadows, Number 7 didn't stop. He opened his hands, and his huge body rushed directly to Li Tianlan against the sword edge. Number 8 jumped up behind Number 7, waved his fists, and directly hit Li Tianlan's head. He was sober, indifferent, crazy, and mechanically stiff. The two of them cooperated tacitly, one in front and the other in the back. The moment Number 8 jumped up, Li Tianlan could only feel the surging power. There was no ice or fire in the air. Number 8 waved his fists, and the air suddenly burst out with a whistling sound that was almost like an explosion. Countless air was compressed together crazily, with an indescribable fierceness, from top to bottom. Ding! The blade of the long sword in Li Tianlan's hand was surrounded by fire. He stabbed with all his strength and directly stabbed into the heart of Number 7. The scene of the long sword piercing through the chest and splashing blood did not happen as he had imagined. The long sword pierced through the clothes, but it was like stabbing a steel plate, hard and stable. The opponent's body seemed to be unusually slippery, and most of the fire was extinguished the moment it touched the opponent. Number 7's body suddenly straightened against the blade of the sword. Instead of moving forward, the incomparably sharp human emperor began to bend. Li Tianlan's pupils contracted instantly. Number 8's fist-waving figure had passed Number 7 and whistled down. Li Tianlan's face changed for the first time. His body quickly became illusory, and when he appeared, he was already behind Number 7. Boom! Number 8's body fell to the ground. His joints shook, and a clear sound of metal crashing came from inside. Li Tianlan's shadow had dissipated, and the smoke and dust were flying all over the sky. Number 8's body missed its target and fell directly to the ground. A big hole with a depth of nearly half a meter was opened. Countless dense cracks spread over, and the whole laboratory shook violently. For the first time, Li Tianlan felt shocked in his heart. Without hesitation, he waved his sword again and stabbed the back of Number 7's head. Watch out! Shi Tianmingzi's scream suddenly sounded. Li Tianlan's heart sank. Before he could do anything else, Number 7 seemed to have eyes in the back of his head. He suddenly turned around and swept his foot at the same time. Crack! The long sword stabbed Number 7's head fiercely. The blade cut through the skin, but it could not go any further. Number 7's face was expressionless, and he kicked Li Tianlan's waist hard. In an instant, Li Tianlan had no time to change positions with the shadow, and he was directly swept out by the powerful kick. His body flew nearly 20 meters away, smashed a large number of precision instruments, and spat out a mouthful of blood. Shi Tianmingzi exclaimed and subconsciously ran to Li Tianlan's side. She murmured desperately, "They have special alloys in their bodies. You can't kill them." This is the Kusanagi force, a perfect combination of technology and biochemistry. We're finished. Li Tianlan wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth expressionlessly. Feeling the pain of his waist that was almost broken, he resisted the dizziness and calmly said, "How do you know?" "That batch of alloys," Shitian Mingzi smiled bitterly. It was made by Shitian Financial Group, or rather, Night Spirit snatched it from somewhere else and processed it by Shitian Financial Group. I didn't know what East Island used it until today. Li Tianlan's heart skipped a beat. He swallowed a mouthful of blood and said subconsciously, "You know their weaknesses?" Weaknesses? Chapter 150. In this world, there would be no truly perfect things without weaknesses. Especially man-made products. Did the Kusanagi force have no weaknesses? Shitian Mingzi's words were directly filtered out by Li Tianlan. He could be sure that the Kusanagi force must have weaknesses, but they had not been discovered yet. Alloy bones, clear consciousness, super destructive power, no pain, no feelings, and amazing speed. In a flash, Li Tianlan had roughly sorted out the information of the Kusanagi force. Where were their weaknesses? The severe pain continued to spread in Li Tianlan's waist. The kick of number 7 was full of power. The alloy bones were fully exerted, and the power easily broke through the limit of the human body. This kind of super soldier between the scientific and technological forces was not suitable for the 4 realms of martial arts. They had no realm, only the most terrifying power and destructive power. In terms of pure power, that kick was almost equivalent to the full blow of a thunder-shocking realm master. Li Tianlan subconsciously touched his waist, and a warm blood covered his palm. His mind was spinning rapidly, but number 7 and number 8 in front of him did not give him time at all. Without Wuxia and Xianxia's further order, the 2 metal monsters in human skin had rushed over madly. "Retreat," Li Tianlan said in a deep voice and pushed Shitian Mingzi. Then he had switched places with the shadow and appeared behind number 7 and number 8. Shitian Mingzi stood aside with a desperate expression, biting her lip and saying nothing. The Kusanagi force had been awakened. Number 9 guarded Wuxia and Xianxia, which was equivalent to guarding the mechanism opened inside the Black Sun Institute. In other words, if they could not break through the blockade of the Kusanagi force and kill or capture Wuxia and Xianxia, they could not get out at all. In this research institute, Li Tianlan and the Kusanagi force were really a life-and-death battle. Shitian Mingzi silently retreated to the side. Her strength was not bad, but the strength at the peak of the ice-condensing realm could do nothing here. The full blow of any Kusanagi force warrior was enough to break her body. The only thing she could do was to wait. If Li Tianlan died, she would die. If Li Tianlan lived, she would live. The young heavenly son of Zhongzhou State, Shitian Mingzi took a deep breath and stared at Li Tianlan, not even blinking. Li Tianlan was still moving. The second shadow appeared. Then the third shadow. Li Tianlan's figure kept flashing, and the 3 shadows instantly stretched into a triangle. Number 7 and number 8 did not hesitate at all. Their eyes flashed with red light, and the chips implanted in their eyes directly locked on Li Tianlan's real body, chasing closely. Li Tianlan took the last step. The shadow never disappeared. The 3 shadows stood in different positions with Li Tianlan, immediately forming a regular quadrilateral. Li Tianlan's eyes suddenly sharpened. He sheathed his sword. The 2 swords joined and extended, and the human emperor suddenly turned into a silver spear more than 2 meters long. The 3 shadows perfectly copied his movements at the same time. Li Tianlan's eyes were sharp. He raised his long spear and said in a low voice, "Stop." The 3 shadows simultaneously raised their hands. "Who?" The air in the research institute suddenly twisted in a shape visible to the naked eye. Large masses of air gathered toward number 7 and number 8, merging with the air in front of them that was compressed to the extreme. An ear-piercing friction sound that made one's scalp tingle rang out, and the entire research institute became blurry due to the extreme distortion of the air. The strong airflow suddenly stopped with Li Tianlan's voice. The bodies of number 7 and number 8 paused as if they were imprisoned. The whole process took less than a second, but Li Tianlan had already taken action again. He held the spear tightly with both hands. His body rose into the air. He raised the spear over his head and smashed it directly at number 8, who was walking in the front. Destroy. Buddhist incantation of 9 words, destroy formula. It was different from crack. If crack was the strongest outbreak, then destroy was the most ferocious crushing. Meet force with force, go forward with indomitable will. The three shadows followed Li Tianlan and flew up at the same time. 4 long spears fell from above and smashed directly at number 8's head. The confinement effect of the stop formula flashed away. The long spear fell from the air, and number 8 instinctively raised his arms to protect his head. Clang. The moment the silver spear collided with number 8's arms, flesh and blood splashed, but the sound was not a dull sound, but a roar similar to the collision of metals. All the flesh and blood on number 8's arms were completely torn apart, and a pair of alloy arms mixed with flesh and blood appeared in Li Tianlan's sight. The flesh and blood were blurred, and the metal was shining, which looked extremely disgusting. The long spear collided with the arms, and sparks flew everywhere. The distorted air surrounding the two of them spread wildly under the impact of this attack, bringing with it flying dust. The sharp, knife-like shockwave spread out in a circular shape. In the area of more than 10 meters around the three of them, countless utensils exploded one after another, and all kinds of experimental drugs of different colors scattered on the ground. Number 8's face was expressionless, but his body suddenly knelt on the ground under the blow. His weight of at least more than 400 kilograms crashed to the ground. In a blur of smoke and dust, number 8's huge body was smashed into the ground, and more than half of his body completely sank into the ground. At the moment when the long spear fell on number 8's arm, before the sparks rose, no. 7 had taken a sudden step forward and punched Li Tianlan hard in the chest. It was an indescribably huge force, violent and surging like a tide. Li Tianlan's face instantly turned pale. He held the long spear tightly in his hand, but his body was directly blasted out. The huge force drove his body to hit the alloy wall of the research institute. The thick alloy steel plate slid down with his body, and a faint human outline was directly imprinted on it. Li Tianlan's eyes blurred, and the whole world was spinning. Everything went black in front of his eyes, and he shook his head fiercely. At the moment when he regained consciousness, he directly spat out a mouthful of blood. His extremely strong aura suddenly weakened, and the palm holding the spear seemed to tremble slightly. Bang! More than 10 meters in front of Li Tianlan, number 8, whose body had sunk into the ground, suddenly stretched out his hand and hammered the floor beside him. His huge body struggled to stand up from the ground with the sound of metal crashing. His arms had no flesh and blood, but the alloy-covered hands reflected a bright luster, which made people feel cold inside. The next punch will fall on your head. Number 8 clenched his bloody hand and grinned hideously. Ant! Li Tianlan spat out a mouthful of blood again. Then, his eyes narrowed, and his whole body was violent, as if he had fallen into a state of complete anger. He had the wind and thunder veins, the exquisite bone, and the heavenly king heart. He had the strongest inheritance in the dark world for hundreds of years. He entered the thunder-shocking realm at the age of 17. He was the heavenly son of the dark world, not an ant. He still had a long way to go. How could he die here? How dare he die here? Buzz! Li Tianlan suddenly held the long spear in his hand. The 2-meter-long silver spear vibrated slightly and buzzed. He swallowed the blood gushing out of the corner of his mouth, stood up against the wall, and held the human emperor tightly. Are you very good at fighting? He narrowed his eyes, and his tone was calm and soft. Number 7 and number 8 subconsciously stopped, looked at each other, and seemed to be a little stunned. An indescribable sense of danger emanated from Li Tianlan. He twisted his neck and said with a cold smile, I think I made a mistake. Skills are the most useless to deal with things like you, right? He raised the long spear and said softly, so, now, try again. Number 7 and number 8, kill him. Wuxia and Xianxia frowned. As an ordinary person who didn't know martial arts, he noticed the strange and dangerous atmosphere. He didn't want to delay it anymore, so he ordered again. Number 7 and number 8's expressions changed. They suddenly roared and rushed to Li Tianlan. In everyone's sight, Li Tianlan clenched the long spear, also roared, and rushed up without hesitation. Shi Tianmingzi's eyes were dull. In her impression, the newly rising young heavenly son of Zhongzhou State seemed to have always been calm, even indifferent, seemingly soft and calm, but in fact he was prouder than anyone else. His appearance might be very ordinary, but his every move had a deeply hidden but extremely dazzling style. But at this moment, Li Tianlan seemed to be a completely different person. With his roar, his speed was getting faster and faster. He raised the long spear in his hand and rushed to number 7 and number 8 without any fancy moves. His eyes seemed to be brighter than ever, and every move seemed to have a kind of violence and fierceness that seemed to fly out from the depths of his soul. Arrogant, wild, and unparalleled. Bang! The distance between the two sides was less than 5 meters. Li Tianlan's shirt was torn in an instant. His bare upper body was covered with a large bruise on his chest, and there was blood flowing down from his waist. But his momentum was getting higher and higher, and the crazy killing intent and fighting intent continued to condense and rise in him, as if there was no end. Clang! Li Tianlan swept his silver spear, and it directly hit the chests of number 7 and number 8. In the sound of the metal collision, the two super warriors of the Kusanagi force took 2 steps back at the same time, and each step left a footprint. Li Tianlan's body had already leaped up, and he kicked number 7 in the head. At this moment, Li Tianlan seemed to have given up all martial arts. All he had was strength and speed. Number 7 was kicked in the face, and his body staggered back 7 or 8 meters. In a very short time, Li Tianlan swung his long spear in an arc and directly hit number 8. Clang, clang, clang. In an instant, countless sounds of gold and iron colliding rang out violently and intensely. Li Tianlan's face was expressionless, and his movements were steady and swift. In the blink of an eye, he had hit number 8's arm more than 10 times. The alloy of number 8's arm shook violently, but it did not deform at all. Li Tianlan's eyes were ferocious. If 10 times were not enough, what about 100 times? Number 8's body was almost completely smashed into the ground, and number 7's body rushed back at the same time. But this time, Li Tianlan did not wait for number 7 to approach at all, and his body had already rushed over. He stabbed straight with his spear. With a crisp sound of impact, the slender and sharp spear head directly stabbed number 7's body. In an instant, the muscles of Li Tianlan's bare upper body bulged completely, and he kept exerting his strength. Number 8 tried to stand where he was, but Li Tianlan's strength was getting stronger and stronger, and he directly pushed his body against the wall behind him. Number 8's feet exerted force, and he kept sliding under Li Tianlan's push. His feet rubbed against the ground, and his flesh and blood splashed in an instant, but he seemed to feel nothing. He grasped the tip of the spear with one hand and resisted Li Tianlan's strength. Boom! The long spear drove number 8's body into the alloy wall. In an instant, the long spear shortened into a short stick about 1 meter long. Li Tianlan held the short stick and madly smashed at number 8's body from head to toe. The dense sound of iron striking kept ringing, and pieces of flesh and blood splashed out one after another. Number 8's hands, chest, head, and legs began to show a metallic luster. The human skin seemed to be completely broken by Li Tianlan. Number 8 had become a bloody metal monster. Every muscle on his body was glowing with a cold and strange purple color, which was glued to the metal in his body. Countless light spots flickered on his body, and his resistance became more and more fierce. Crack! Li Tianlan's ribs were broken by number 8. Under the severe pain, his strength weakened slightly. Number 8 had already taken a step forward, strode forward, and directly hit Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan, who was almost covered in blood, was knocked away on the spot. In the roar, number 7, who had climbed up from the ground again, suddenly caught Li Tianlan's body. He swung him wildly to the other side of the laboratory. A silver light flashed in the laboratory. The human emperor flew out of Li Tianlan's hand and fell in the corner. Li Tianlan's body smashed 2 experiment tables and slammed into the wall. But before number 7 and number 8 could react, his body flashed and appeared in front of them again. His aura seemed weak, but his whole body was full of a kind of desperate heat and madness. "Go on," he said, and his hands shook. After the human emperor left his hands, A huge icicle appeared directly in his hands. The icicle kept extending, and in an instant, it had become a huge pillar with a diameter of 1 meter and a length of more than 10 meters. All of Li Tianlan's reasons seemed to have completely disappeared. His eyes flashed, full of fanatical fighting intent. He held the icicle with both hands and suddenly swept it across. There was only Li Tianlan's completely crazy roar in the whole laboratory. He grabbed the icicle, which was already 20 meters long, and directly swept it on number 7 and number 8. It had nothing to do with power. The huge volume of the icicle directly swept number 7 and number 8 away. This overbearing and eccentric weapon whistled violently in the air. As the icicle swept past, all the instruments and lights in the laboratory that blocked its attack route exploded in an instant, and countless sparks burst. The icicle in Li Tianlan's hand danced wildly, and everything in the laboratory was completely broken. Everyone stared at the scene with their mouths agape. Shi Tianmingzi finally saw what a real young chosen one was. It was not only combat effectiveness, but also absolutely vigorous and unflinching fighting will. This absolutely overbearing and violent battle looked so cold, but the chosen one of Zhongzhou State not far away was so fanatical. In the desperate situation of life and death, Shi Tianmingzi's eyes were blurred, and even her lower body was a little wet. For the first time, she even felt that her father's words before leaving made some sense. If she could rely on the Samsara Palace through Li Tianlan, then even if she had some intimate relations with Li Tianlan behind her husband's back, it was definitely worth it, although it was not chaste. The huge icicle swept past, and in the countless bursting sparks, number 7 and number 8 waved their fists at the same time. Both of them were also bloody, but they were still vigorous. The huge icicle shattered in an instant. But the icicle in Li Tianlan's hand gathered together again in the explosion and extended again. Li Tianlan went all out. The icicle in his hand expanded in an instant, and its diameter exceeded 5 meters in the blink of an eye. An icicle across the whole laboratory was formed again. Li Tianlan held the icicle high with both hands. He raised his arms to the sky. Boom! The icicle rotated in Li Tianlan's roar, and the lights of the whole laboratory flickered violently. All the instruments, computers, utensils, statues, and clocks were completely broken. The bodies of number 7 and number 8 had been knocked against the wall. Wuxia Xianxia, who had been watching the situation nervously, changed his face dramatically. He suddenly reached out and pointed at Li Tianlan, shouting, "Number 9, kill him, quick!" Number 9 took a step forward. At the same time, the icicle in Li Tianlan's hand was once again broken by number 7 and number 8. The whole laboratory was stirred by the icicle, and the circuit system was completely destroyed. At the moment the icicle broke, the laboratory suddenly fell into darkness. Number 9's forward body suddenly stopped. Number 7 and number 8, who rushed to Li Tianlan, also froze in place, motionless, like dead things. Li Tianlan froze for a moment and waved his hands subconsciously. A fire lit up. In the fire, 3 super warriors of the Kusanagi force were frozen in place, and the light on their bodies had completely disappeared. General Fujiwara Ping, the top leader of the Divine Wind Force, stood together with Wuxia Xianxia, looking pale and desperate. Shi Tianmingzi was stunned and then ecstatic. She rushed to Li Tianlan's side and said in surprise, "Mr. Tianlan, the Kusanagi force is short of energy. I know, we came in very suddenly, and Wuxia Xianxia had no time to replenish the energy of the Kusanagi force. Their previous battle had been supported by electricity. If we kill Wuxia Xianxia, our task will be completed." This battle was so fierce that if it continued, no one knew what the result would be. Now this dramatic change was a complete surprise for Shi Tianmingzi. Li Tianlan remained calm and said flatly, "Kill Wuxia Xianxia? I suddenly changed my mind. He is more useful alive than dead." He narrowed his eyes, looked at the thunder-shocking realm master beside Wuxia Xianxia who had lost his combat power, and said calmly, "Who is that?" Shi Tianmingzi's body was close to Li Tianlan, and she said quickly, "That is Fujiwara Ping, the top leader of the Divine Wind Force. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's journey, YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.